Well, welcome to our afternoon session. We would like to begin with a presentation from the Kansas Association for Conservation and Environmental Education. Janet Wall will introduce our speaker.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. This is really, truly a pleasure for me. I have worked with this group for the past 12 years, and it's really exciting to work with them. At first, I was a little concerned. I thought they were tree huggers, but they're truly not. You know, not that trees aren't good, but I never wanted to hug one. And but anyway, Laura is the executive director for it's Kansas Association of Conservation and Environmental Education. We call it KSDE. Just to tell you a little bit about Laura. She has a bachelor's degree in elementary education, a master's in administration, and a master's in administration and supervision, and a doctorate from K-State in curriculum and instruction for math, science, and technology. I'm sure she's pleased about K-State today.
Does everybody have to bring that up?
It happens so rarely. Come on.
Okay, she has more than 30 years in the field of education, which include being a, well, believe it or not, a Chicago public school middle and elementary teacher, an instructor for pre-service teachers at K-State, and a career educator who's worked in a variety of settings, including both public and private schools, post-secondary and informal education settings. She's currently, as I said, the executive director for KC, a position she's had since 2000. But she's also actively involved with the affiliates network for the North American Association for Environmental Education, Project Learning Tree, the National Science Teachers Association, and has served as a board member for the Council of Elementary Science International, and is truly a pleasure for me to introduce Dr. Downey, not only the executive director, but a personal friend.
Thank you
Welcome,
very much,
Laura.
Janet. I appreciate the very kind introduction. And Madam Chairwoman and Commissioner and the board members, thank you for the opportunity to come and talk with you today about KC, which we call KC because we don't want to keep saying the Kansas Association for Conservation and Environmental Education. So if you hear me say KC, I don't mean Kansas City, I mean our organization today. And what I thought I would do is just kind of give you an overview of who we are and what we do. And we want to start with what our vision, our organizational vision is. And what we would love to see and what we're working very hard toward is creating an environmentally literate Kansas citizenry. Our mission is to provide, and this is key to our mission, quality, non-biased, science-based environmental education for all Kansans. And when Janet says we're not a bunch of tree huggers, I think that's kind of a nice compliment. What we try to do very hard is practice our motto of teaching kids how to think about things, but not what to think about things. We never take a stand on an environmental issue, and we never advocate for a particular point of view. We work to get kids through the educational process to develop those critical thinking and problem-solving skills so they can look at issues from a lot of different points of view. We've had a long history, and some of you are aware of this, of working with the State Board and Department of Education. And actually, KC was formed in 1969 in partnership with then Superintendent of Public Instruction, Merle Hayden. And we were originally conceived as an advisory council for conservation and environmental education to the State Department of Education. That's where our origins come from. In 1978, there was a House resolution that was passed that directed the State Board of Education to encourage, support, and promote environmental education in Kansas and to work directly with KC to do that. We've maintained ex officio representation from both the State Department and the State Board of Education on our board of directors, so they don't get to vote, but they get to come and share what's going on organizationally and have input and provide insight into the things that we're doing. And we wind up doing a lot of ongoing work, and I'll talk a little bit more about that as we go along, with State Board and Department of Education assistance, including our most recent environmental literacy plan, which you all took a look at a couple years ago, and our strategic plan. When we talk about what makes for good environmental education, it has to be engaging, hands-on, and it needs to be inquiry learning. It should be interdisciplinary. It should focus on critical thinking and problem-solving skills. And what we do know is that this aligns very nicely with the Kansas College and Career Ready standards. We're working on a formal alignment to those things. And we also know that it fosters leadership opportunities in real-world scenarios for kids and for adults. So what are we doing to accomplish our mission and vision right now? And probably our flagship premier program of most interest to you all is our Kansas Green Schools program. We started that in 2008, and it was about engaging kids and parents, teachers, administrators, community members in making their schools healthier, more environmentally friendly places to work and learn and play. We provide educational opportunities for our pre-K through 12 students to increase their awareness and understanding of environmental interrelationships that impact their public health, our society, and promote responsible environmental stewardship practices. And what we would like to see as a goal of that is that our kids come away with an appreciation and understanding of air and water quality, climate change, energy and energy reduction, recycling of solid waste, and wildlife habitat. There's some really great benefits of this Kansas Green Schools program. They are real-world, hands-on investigations. Those kids who are doing these investigations collect data, and they do analysis, so they're hitting on those science and engineering practices. They're using their critical thinking and problem-solving skills to develop an action plan for their school. They're doing contextualized learning, again, hitting those science disciplinary core ideas. Definitely developing student leadership and service. Oftentimes these students engage in doing projects outside of their schools and in their communities. And they're saving money for schools through energy, water, and waste savings. And there's definitely a strong component of engaging community and celebrating the work that these kids are doing at their schools. And here is a lovely map of our more than 450 green schools that are currently a part of the Kansas Green Schools Network. We're really pleased that there's a pretty diverse geographic representation of schools. They go from elementary to high school and everything in between. There are public and private schools represented in this group, and this is an entirely voluntary program for these schools. They choose to participate. They're not required to do anything. We simply provide them with some tools so that they can start engaging their students in investigating. And we have 5 investigations. The first one deals with water, and they look at water from both a conservation standpoint but also a water quality standpoint in their school. They collect data on how much water they're using, where their water is coming from, how their school is impacting water quality when the water leaves the school campus. And when they have all that data collected, they're developing action plans to do a better job with their water. Same thing with energy. They go through their school and investigate where their energy is coming from, how their school is using energy, where they're using energy efficiently, and maybe where they could make some energy efficiency improvements based on the data that they collect, and developing an action plan to address that. In the healthy school environment, they're looking at everything from indoor air quality to looking at school lunch and nutrition to even looking at what kind of chemicals are being used in the schools for pest management and whether they have integrated pest management plans and all of those components. And again, collecting data to look at how they can improve the health of their school environment. Waste and recycling, this is sort of the gateway for a lot of teachers in schools. They look at where is their waste coming from and what categories does it fall into? What can they do to produce less waste? What can they do to recycle the waste that they are creating and or compost it? And then how can they complete that cycle by using products that are made from reclaimed and recycled materials? And then the last investigation is called the learning community, and it's really about embracing the whole school ground as a learning laboratory, and so it's about, and the community as well. So it's about getting the kids outside and looking at, are there places on our school grounds that might make for a good habitat, for example, for butterflies, or is there a place where we could have a sensory garden where our students could go out and use that as a foundation for some of the learning that they're doing? Are there places in our community where we could go and have kids investigate in the stream? once those investigations are completed, and they can complete as many or as few as they would like to, we offer them an opportunity to get recognized for what they're doing. And the first is through the Kansas Green Schools of Excellence, and it's like a certification program, and there are 3 different levels of certification, ranging from a first level where the kids are doing one investigation and one action plan to the highest level where they're really doing a comprehensive look at their school program. And when they complete that recognition application, then we honor them with a flag of the appropriate color, depending on the level that they've achieved. We also have a Kansas Green School of the Year. We'll be announcing those for this year shortly, and would love to invite you all to a celebration on April 4th in Manhattan, where we'll be honoring 2 really outstanding schools this year. And then we're also partnering with the State Department of Education to promote and coordinate the National Green Ribbon School Recognition. And I don't know how familiar you are with that program, but it's a U.S. Department of Education program, and it's very similar to the Blue Ribbon acknowledgement recognition, but this one is based on doing environmental education, being energy, water, waste conscious, and then service to community. So just to give you a picture, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about an example of a school. And this happens to be one of the schools that we recognized as our Kansas Green School of the Year last year, and who went on to be recognized by the U.S. Department of Education as a Green Ribbon School. And I can't tell you all of the stories, but this is a great one. Blue Jacket Flint Elementary, these are some of the students and parents and teachers from that school. They're located in Shawnee Mission, and they take going green seriously. Their staff first engaged with some professional development to learn best practices for engaging the students in the community. And then armed with those great tools and resources, they began to engage their students in making improvements to their school that resulted in savings in energy, water, waste reduction, and composting while using green technology. They've installed a rain garden, which is a capture garden to help with runoff and improve water quality, and they've done some outdoor service learning projects within the community. Thanks to the partnerships and the project-based learning, their lead teacher, Lucas Shivers, who's actually now the science coordinator in Manhattan, but who was a teacher at this school previously, noted that their students are learning on a highly technical level with the use of green technologies, and they're getting exposed to new career opportunities. And not only did these students have relevant hands-on learning that kept them interested and motivated, the school conducted some analysis of their test scores, and they found out that there was an increase of about 10% based on classroom science assessment after these lessons were implemented in their classrooms. The average is going from 75% to 88%. And in addition to the payoff in the classroom, they also realized a payoff in savings for the school. And Blue Jacket Flint saw a 29% savings in energy use over the course of a year, which saved their school a good deal of money. As a matter of fact, Blue Jacket Flint saw the largest increase in reduced energy cost in the whole district that year. So that's an example of one of our green schools. We also have a program that parallels with this called the School Garden Program. And it is a part of our Healthy Community investigation that we really bumped out. See, I'm running out of time, so I'm going to try and flip through this more quickly. But we know that the School Garden Programs helps to instill a sense of place, encourage community and social development. It promotes healthy lifestyles and enhances academic achievement while instilling that land ethic and reconnecting kids to the land, which is something that we know our kids are missing. The materials that we have for the School Garden Program include a garden gate that was developed by Kansas teachers and gardeners, and those materials include a curriculum that has some great hands-on math, science, social studies, and language arts activities that are connected to school gardening, so the kids aren't just out playing in the garden, they're actually achieving some of their college and career-ready standards. There's some virtual tours of school gardens throughout the state so that teachers and students and parents can see examples of what other schools are doing. And it is, as I said, a part of our investigation in our Green Schools of Excellence program. And I wanted to share with you another little story about Wyandotte High School. And I picked that one because Janet, I had to. So, led by science teacher Dr. Mike Holtz, Wyandotte High School started very simply with an idea to turn their unused eyesore of a courtyard into a school garden. And he brought in other teachers, including, and what's been really phenomenal about the way that I think he's done this is that the English teacher, the math teacher, the history teacher, the art teacher, the ESL teacher, and the technology teachers all use this space as a learning laboratory with their kids. The teachers noticed that the students were engaged in their learning while they were out in the garden, and the students would even show up after school on weekends and over the summer to hang out in that garden. And the project has quickly grown to a school-wide effort to connect the kids to the places they live and engage them in learning that's meaningful, relevant, and has a direct impact on their lives. Most recently, Dr. Holtz, knowing that the growing season in Kansas is very limited, wrote some grants to secure some funding to install a greenhouse, and he began experimenting with his high school students with aquaponics. The students, they couldn't afford to buy the official gear for that, so the students had to engineer and design an aquaponic setup that was built off of pieces that were less expensive, and learn some engineering and design lessons along the way. This system is going to ultimately raise tilapia in the tanks underneath, and they will have that tilapia will be the fertilization for the circulated water that will grow produce up above. The students have conducted experiments with plant growth rates in the aquaponics compared to traditional methods, and they found out the aquaponics does a lot better job of growing bigger, healthier plants in their experimentation. And I think what was really interesting was Dr. Holtz noted that in a school where 93% of his students qualify for free and reduced lunch, that access to high-quality nutritional food is critical. And to be able to engage the students in learning and food production and entrepreneurism are additional benefits of teaching and learning this way. So those are a couple of examples of what we've been doing with students through the Green Schools program, and really the sky's the limit. We just gave them some ideas, and from there they take it and run in ways that we cannot even begin to anticipate that they will. We try to serve as a state umbrella organization for environmental education and get those resources out to people. We also try to promote those public and private partnerships for environmental education. We do that, for example, with water festivals throughout the state, and some of you may have water festivals in your communities, where groups of private businesses, government agencies, local nonprofits get together and teach kids about water in their communities. And then we try to connect and recognize our environmental education leadership across the state. We have a conference every year. This year it will be in Lawrence in June, where teachers get together and share their ideas and share what they're doing in their classrooms. We do professional development on an ongoing basis, where we provide the materials to teachers and give them some direct experience using those materials that they can then go and use in their classrooms. This is one of my favorite comments from one of our workshop participants. And that's not atypical of the folks. They come in and feel like they're charged up because they found new ways to teach the things that they're already teaching in their classrooms. And then, of course, we honor those who are doing outstanding things with our awards celebration. So that, in a nutshell, is our organization. And I think I just made it in 20 minutes, didn't I? Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Well, you're doing an awful lot to promote environmental education. I did have a question, though. You mentioned that the garden part of it had a curriculum that went along with it. Is there something similar that enables schools to implement the other projects
Yes.
without just,
Yes.
that gives them a framework?
Yes, there's an investigation framework and then supplemental curricular activities that go with them.
And are those supplied to them free of charge, or a small fee? Or
Small fees, very small fees. Our workshop fees for teachers are $25. So. And we hand them more materials than they can hope to use.
Well, I know you operate on a shoestring budget.
We are operating on a very shoestring budget right now, and it's been challenging for us, just like many organizations, but we know that there are a lot of folks who believe in what we do and have continued to support us, and we really appreciate the support of the Board of Education and their recommendations for funding us. What happens after that is a whole different thing, but we'll work on seeing if we can keep that funding in place.
Were there other questions for Laura? Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate you being here.
Excuse me for running off. I'm going to exit stage left. Thank you so much.
Next, we have an update on the accreditation model, and Scott Myers is with us, and Brad, I see, too. Brad Nguyen-Swander.
Okay, let me just. Good afternoon. We just have a few slides that we wanted to run through with you. A lot of work. We're in our third year of working on the development of this new accreditation model. People are already talking about the 5 R's. A lot of school districts are already incorporating it into their conversations. I know one school district, for example, is already looking at every time that they work on curriculum alignment, lesson plans, they always tie it to one of the 4 R's about relevance, relationship, responsive culture. But we want to bring you up to date the work across Kansas that's happened recently and what's scheduled to take place over the next several months. The first and foremost thing that we always do when we're out working with schools and districts, and matter of fact, a week ago last Friday we were in Newton with 20-some private schools that have always seeked accreditation through Kansas, working with them on where we're at and getting their input and advice. But we always start with this board's definition of college and career ready, and how it really ties into the direction we're going with the new model, to where, we've lived with QPA for so long that there's been only one driver, and that is, yeah, that's fine, but how did you do on that test? So we always try to start that, although academic preparation is important, that's just one piece of this board's definition of college and career ready, and how we want to focus on the cognitive, the technical, and those employability skills. So as we're working through what you're going to see here in a few minutes, we really try to focus on those 21st century learner skills and how we embed those all throughout the rubric. Because we truly believe if our ultimate goal is college and career ready, we have to design a system that values and recognizes that throughout the whole model. So those are the two, these are two of the slides that we begin with every group to let them know that the purpose, the value, because if we can't draw it back to the board's definition of college and career ready and truly mean those 21st century learner skills, then we've missed. We don't want to create a system that does not inherently value these. Otherwise, it'll always go back, how did you do on a test? Even though that's important, that's just a piece of what you're going to see in this update on the model. So as we go through the rest of it, Scott Myers, Director for Teacher Licensure and Accreditation. We also have Vicki Seeger. Vicki is part of our team that she spends every day, all day, working with the field and working with this. She may have some involvement in this also. So, Scott?
Thank you, Brad. Last thing I ever want to do is put words in your mouth, but I imagine when you woke up this morning and looked at the agenda today, you saw that TLA, the person who's Scott Myers, would be before you 3 times today, and you thought yourself, what a lucky day. If I showed up 4 times, I'd give you a little punch card and you get a free sub at the time, but we'll keep it to 3. I do want to also introduce Dr. Vicki Seeger to you as well. She's the lead education program consultant around accreditation, and she truly is, in my mind's eye, one of our best and brightest. She continually pushes and prods and thinks about things in a divergent manner for us. If Vicki would stand up. Let them see you in all your glory. This is Vicki. And like I said, she's a driving force behind this. We're going out tomorrow, and we've been going out working with a variety of groups, and Vicki takes the lead as we go through it. So, as we move through this, if you have questions, please do not hesitate to stop me. I know I get going, I get excited. I'll slow down if need be. The major differences, and Ken, you asked the question earlier today, the reasoning behind shifting from school accreditation to more of a district approach. The idea behind that is the systems approach of improvement. What we've learned from the KLN network, the work that's been going on Colleen Riley's team, is the idea that districts have a lot of different buildings, a lot of different initiatives, a lot of different programs, a lot of different work going on, taking place. Unfortunately, we talk about our silos or our cubicles of caring here in KSDE. Well, trust me, having been out in the field, it happens in districts as well. I'm busy being the high school principal. I kind of forget what's going on in the middle school, who then kind of forgets about what's going on in the elementary. We try to keep it all together, but there's just a lot of work that takes place individually. The systems approach, it brings us together and say, well, if it's working here, I've got some struggles over here, how might this help us? Just bringing it all together. So it's moving away from that silo approach. As a sports analogy, I'm an old football coach. I would teach the offensive tackles how to do a certain play, and the tight ends to do a certain play. That's great in and of itself. They're doing it well or not doing well, but it didn't really matter if we brought them together and ran the play together. And so running the play together as a district, that's what the systems approach here is really about. Thus, the move from a single building accreditation model to a district accreditation model. Moves away, as Brad already alluded to, the punitive system tied to the student achievement on a single test. How I like to say that is I happen to be a father, and my youngest is 16, and a district is so much more, or a school is so much more than how my 16-year-old son might be doing on a math test in March. There's so many other things that go into play in the schooling experience, thus the 5 R's. We're looking at a multi-year accreditation process, and the idea behind that, of course, is if we've done any kind of research on change theory, it takes time to implement. It takes time to go out and make the initiative work, and then to analyze it and to adjust, and then possibly move to a different, move it around just a bit. 1 year in, 1 year out, there's just not enough time to see the impact of the new works or the good works taking place. There needs to be a continuity. Also, by the way, it's not the reason behind this, but it runs parallel. This is what occurs with the higher ed accreditation as well. It's a multi-year approach. It's a 6 or 7 year approach on the higher ed approach. We're looking specifically this is a growth model. As you've seen, there's 5 R's, and within each R there are various stovepipes. And so the idea is the districts would come along and they'd basically utilize those rubrics as a needs assessment or self-assessment. How are we doing in these areas? And then through their data analysis and their analysis of what goes on in their district, they would choose 2 of those areas on which to focus. to help themselves grow. It might be, and they could be, just to throw numbers at this to make it easy, it could be that they're at 90th percentile on everything, but this one is 89%. So they're doing well in this area, but they could still choose to improve it a little bit more. So they'll have the option, the freedom to make that choice. Now, this involves critical thinkers or critical friends who come along and help the districts make that choice, and we don't have that figured out yet. All right, we don't to that point, the people who come in and help the districts, we don't have that figured out at this point. But the idea is true to the fact that in my district, I know, or we know, that we have an issue with, let's say, parent engagement. We just don't do it as well as we'd like to. And so we can focus on that particular area. Where the district just down the road might say, you know what, we just do a great job in that area. Our issue is more around student learning or staff development and professional learning. So we want to focus our actions in that area. So it provides the opportunity for the districts to focus in on cultural needs that take place. In my career, I've had the very good fortune of teaching and or administrating in 3 of the corners of the state: Northeast, Southeast, and Southwest. And yes, we're all Kansans, and yes, we're all Midwesterners, but there are culturally slight differences in those individual areas. And so having this focus, this approach that allows me at home to focus on our individual needs rather than the need that centrally, somebody has said, in Kansas, I think that makes a difference. It'll make our educators happier. And it's a better approach as well. And then also the final step here, it allows us to get some meaningful research at a variety of all the different stovepipes, because what we're going to find is there are absolute exemplars out there. There will be people who are doing, use my example of parent engagement, just have an excellent parent engagement approach. And what happens now is we just don't share that information with one another for whatever reason. We're busy taking care of life in our own district. If we get to where we want this to go, I kind of see us having this, it's almost like a clearinghouse, to where, my district, we do really well in parent engagement, so we post our information there. Another district comes along and says, we really want to focus our efforts there. We think that's the key, but we just don't know what to do yet. Well, the research will, you'll have the database information there, and then the higher ed, as we work with higher ed, can come along and do actual research behind it all to see how does it really relate to student achievement. So these are the big major differences between what we were doing with the old style accreditation. Work that has been completed over the past year fall into these 5 different areas. We've been involved in a great amount of field testing, working on the rubrics themselves, because we have to have a shared definition, common language. We have to know what we're talking about. What does modeling look like in a given area? And a variety of different focus groups came together. It wasn't just Scott and Vicki and Brad sitting around drinking a cup of coffee and saying, what does quality leadership look like? We brought together focus groups from experts from the field who helped create those rubrics.
I see that we have a question from Jim McNeese, and then Ken, did you have a question as well? You're okay. We'll go with Jim's, and then you're next. Jim?
Just as a point of reference, we're going to, I don't know if we want to wait till the end, or do we want to do this as it percolates up?
I think it's fine to do it when it's rolling.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Jay, this is, as you know, a huge issue, and it's going to have all kinds of ramifications for schools and districts. I'm kind of with Ken on the issue of going to a district-wide accreditation as opposed to a building accreditation. And no offense, but you kind of whisked through that.
No, that's fine.
And I've been part of accrediting schools since 1975 and different processes. And one of the biggest concerns we always had was that as a visiting team or as a principal in a building, that you go through this process. And I got to be careful what I say, because it can be misinterpreted by people outside of education. But for many schools and for many districts, it's a task to be completed, not necessarily a process for improvement. And I won't name the district I was in, but it was not a large district. It was a large district for me when I went. The teachers who were in the building, and this is 30 some years ago, said that, they really enjoyed the process, but they were sorry to see us go because as soon as we left, they were going to go back to do what they were going to do anyway. And I'd been through the NCA, the state stuff through the 80s when QPA came in, and more recently on some of the different processes we use. And I guess when the district thing scares me because what's a big district to you?
Wichita's a big district.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, there's 100 schools, and
Yeah, correct.
quite frankly, what happens in Robinson has little effect on me at Northwest. No offense, Kathy.
Okay.
The uniqueness of the district thwarts the idea of a district-wide accreditation, because when you talk about your example, a parent engagement, you can have 50 schools doing a great parent engagement, and 50 schools that look like they're doing a great parent engagement, and the district will be able to demonstrate clearly they're doing a great parent engagement. You'll never see whether a school is actually doing a parent engagement. A large district, most of the districts in our state are not large.
Right.
And the vast majority. And it makes sense when I was principal in Udall to have Udall High School and junior high school, which I was the principal of, and the elementary school, and great conversations. But it wouldn't make this, I don't see how this is going to be applicable in Wichita,
Right.
and possibly even Goddard. They have multiple high schools now in a lot of the districts in the suburban areas. I'm having a hard, you're going to have to convince me on that. I'm just not convinced that this is a viable methodology to enhance, through the accreditation process, the improvement process itself.
Yeah, the only reason
I haven't heard anything
Yeah.
that convinced me.
Yeah, the reason I'm jumping in is because I've been in the conversations with this since it started 3 years ago. What led to the reason from the field, the input from the QPA Advisory Council, we met, we have a team of superintendents, a team of principals, a team of teachers that they've all had input on it. The reason to step into looking at the district was a lot of what we started learning and is now part of the Kansas Learning Network is that we can continue to go out and work with individual buildings. But unless there is the support, the structure, the change in the system within the district, even when you look at a Wichita, part of the Kansas Learning Network, we now have district facilitators working with implementation coaches in buildings to make sure that change doesn't just happen in a building. They have to have a culture within that district that allows them to be successful long term. And there are certain things that buildings have control of, but there's a lot of things within a school district that the building has no input on or supports or decisions on. So that's the whole reasoning from the beginning of this, is to start looking at you can have, and we have in Kansas, some districts where you can have a governor's achievement award building and a building that is a priority school. And how the district is supporting those two may be totally different. So that's where the whole look at accrediting districts has changed from instead of 1,300 different buildings, looking at 286 districts. And it wouldn't be that it's easier, because it's a total shift in how we approach it, because we already have the system designed right now to accredit buildings. But it's buildings will only go as far as a district is going to allow it to. So that's the whole look at why Kansas is looking at going to a district accreditation to make that systemic. And it will look different in Wichita than it does in Udall.
And I can buy that. What I'm afraid of is that, and I'll go back, I agree with the district should be held to responsibility and be a partner in the process that you just described. What I don't want to do is have schools disappear. in the process. Now, you're going to assure me that they're not going to disappear, but you haven't given me the methodology by which we're going to hold them accountable, because it still comes down to the building principal, faculty, and parents of that particular building and building community that's going to make a difference. So you haven't told me how you're going to do
that might be a good clarification, because accountability is still at the building level. All of our AMOs are all at the building level. All of our reports are still at the building level. So there's no way a building can slip off into the distance, because if they are not performing around our AMOs and our accountability, which is still the results part of the 5 R's, that is still calculated at the building and at the district level. So buildings won't, number one, be able to just kind of fade off and be unrecognized and not held accountable. The second thing is, in the process, we are developing how buildings feed that information into a more systems approach, instead of, yeah, you're doing well on that part of town, you're struggling. Every building will feed in input on the whole accountability piece of it, because we have to ensure, and that's the one thing we're still developing and working on, is ensuring that every building has voice, input, and value into the overall look at that district.
So I can agree with everything you just said, and I want to state clearly that what I see in Wichita and what I see in Whitewater, Remington is systemically the same. The districts are taking responsibility, from the superintendent and the board, to the building principals, and they all have plans. I mean, no district will be coming up to you without a plan, a systemic plan for their improvement in their district that they have worked with their board, to develop and implement. They can all articulate those. And I guess you're making me feel a little bit better, but not a whole lot, when you tell me that the buildings are still going to be held individually accountable, because I will tell you this, there's some really good people who can morph into the woodwork, and you can lose them because of size or because of there's distraction by someone else's more noticeable faults or failures or challenges. I still need to see details on it. I like the idea of going to the district model, but I sure don't want to leave schools out in their individual accountabilities, or, as you've called it, their individual voice, and understanding that how districts are organized, whether it be a Wichita or Elkhart or Argonia or Goddard, that all of them are organized a little differently, though there are groups that look familiar. And what fits in Hays, Kansas might not fit, in La Crosse.
Absolutely. And I know we have, I think, 30 minutes, but we could do a full-day workshop that gets into the details on the building accountability and the building input and the building voice around. And that's why, again, we want to look at a multi-year approach, because you can't just... So.
Thank you.
Before I call on Ken, I had a point of clarification on this. The 2 goals that you've discussed, I had assumed that buildings would have goals. Oh, but so the specific goals are district goals. And Jim gave the example of a school that needed parent involvement and another one that didn't. But wouldn't the district goals be more overreaching, and then the buildings could focus on what they...
Absolutely. Every building is going to have their own school improvement building goals that they're working on. But when you think about, if you forget the results are, and you look at the other 4, we don't want school districts trying to bite off more than they can handle in the first year or 2. So after they go through and they evaluate where they believe they are, and they have that team that kind of looks at their data and says, yes, we agree. And as a district, they're going to start focusing on a couple goals, whether it's our school culture, whether it's our parent involvement. All of that will be based on all the input that they get from their buildings. Now, each building is going to say, yeah, we believe we're at this point. We may be working on something more specific to my building, but as a district, they're going to select, the initial plans are as a district, they're going to select 2 of their goals that they want to focus on as a district.
Okay. Ken Willard.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm really trying to understand this, and I don't. And I'm not faulting you for not trying, but I guess I'm just not clear on what the driving motive or reason is for moving from accrediting schools to districts, despite what I've just heard here. I look at this list. Why would accrediting schools, as opposed to districts, not allow for all those improvements that are listed there? Moving to multiple or 4-year accreditation process or any of them. I just don't I'm just not clear on what's to be gained by accrediting districts as opposed to schools, except for a fewer number of entities to accredit. And I've been listening to what you've been saying about the continued accountability of schools, but I just still cannot. If somebody asks me and I have to explain it, I can't tell you why we're doing this.
From the very beginning, one of the things that we've heard even more from principals and teachers is school buildings have very little control of a lot of the decisions that are made within their district. They can handle, and every district's different, but they have little input on resources. They have little input on large scale, whether it's curriculum alignment. We have we hear from a lot of school districts and principals that I may be doing, adopting one set of curriculum in my building, but another elementary is doing so. We're all doing things differently. But if we went more to a systems approach as a district, then it would force us to have conversations in continuity and effectiveness, because there's so many things we don't, as silos within our district, have control of. But when we all come together as a district, when I say leadership team, that just doesn't mean principals and curriculum directors. Those are teacher leaders. When we all come together for a common goal, then we can start having more large-scale effects on student learning from pre-K through 12 in our whole district. And that's where it all started, because especially in our schools that became part of the Kansas Learning Network, they were very defensive to start out that really someone's going to come in and look at us and tell us what to do. And then they found out that I had one superintendent tell me a year later, I realized I had 4 elementaries. All 4 elementaries were doing different curriculums. It was competitive. They never met. They never shared. And now that we were forced to take a systems district approach to school improvement, it is so much more crystal clear about what we're all about, not only with parent involvement. So that's where it all started from, is moving away from accrediting silos to taking a totally different approach and looking at what is your system K through 12, and bring the people together that can make decisions that affect every level, every building, instead of just people not at the table together that need to be at the table within the same district.
Well, it seems to me if there is that much diversity of what's taking place in in class in different schools in the district, that is a management issue that needs to be addressed at the district level. And on the other hand, it seems to me that if the idea is to just centralize that, so there's one approach for the entire district, for all the schools in Wichita, for instance, that seems to be maybe a bit of overreach too, and not allowing enough flexibility or ability to innovate or do things creatively. We don't want to limit that in any fashion.
And it wouldn't be us doing that. It would be Wichita School District looking at the uniqueness of their district, and that doesn't mean that every elementary school has to do it the same way. They're just taking more of a systems approach about how do we want to look at parent involvement within the Wichita School District. Now, it might be different at this elementary or that elementary.
That's going to change by community.
Absolutely.
Yeah, right.
So no community is the same, and no building within a district would have to be the same. That is all determined at the local level. It's just, it forces the conversation of buildings to have that conversation beyond their building walls. It brings all elementaries within a district. It brings the team together and say, where are we as a district? And what supports it? And the superintendents that were part of the learning network, one of the most valuable processes they learned from that, and yeah, it could have been a management style, but it could have just been we had a system in the past that didn't encourage or value that large-scale approach to school improvement or accreditation, or taking that look at what's going on within our school district as opposed to what's going on in 100 different buildings within our district. And each one of you are making your own decisions. And yeah, it might be management, but we know this is going on in school districts all across Kansas already. This wouldn't change many of them to do anything. They've already gone this direction. And I know, for example, Advanced Ed is already moving to district accreditation, because it's just a change of changing conversation and behavior within a district as opposed to just leaving it to each building.
Okay, well, you're making a good effort to help me, and I'm trying to get it. But I'm just thinking, if the weakness in what we're doing is the failure for districts to properly manage their resources or all their different buildings, then maybe we need an additional accreditation of districts on top of accrediting schools. Because it just seems to me we're talking about a management issue, and to not accredit schools any longer, I'm just having difficulty getting my arms around that and why it's beneficial. So, I mean, you've done a good job, and I understand some of what you're after. But I don't know how to phrase my question any better. So thank you.
John Bacon.
Thank you. Brad, I think that what you're talking about might be a possible solution to encourage some of the ideas that you're trying to get through to the system. But I don't know that that's the only possible solution, to go to accrediting districts versus schools. I mean, I had just heard about an additional accreditation that Ken was talking about. That might be one thing we can do. The part that I'm more concerned about is results and our customers, the parents. If they have a child in a school, now it seems like things are more local. And if we move to a district accreditation, that school could very well, in my mind, be lost in the system. Where at this point, a district at some point, if a school's on improvement, they potentially could lose funding for that school. And they're going to have to figure out another way. If they want to keep it open, they're going to have to fund it some other way. But they're going to lose funding for it. So it puts pressure on them to deal with the problem and help out that superintendent or not the superintendent, but the principal and those teachers, whatever. And I think we're getting help we need at that level, and we're crediting at a school building level. And I think that is better serving to our customers.
And I think this is probably something we need to take back to our advisory councils and those groups, because if we can't
Did you have parents involved in those?
We have like K-Perk,
Yeah.
and yeah, they're involved. The difference is, right now, every school is accredited based off of test scores. Because QPA, it's really results.
Exactly.
That doesn't change. We still have building level results. We still have priority schools or buildings,
Well, right there,
focus
we're
schools.
saying we're taking away the punitive system.
Well, because right now the only decision is based off that test score. And it's somewhat punitive because they don't get recognized for all the things they're doing in the other 4 R's. But there will still be, for example, you move into a community and you want to see how this elementary is doing, you'll still have those building report cards, you'll look at the results, you'll know, where they are performance-wise. All accountability is still at the building level. But I hear what you're saying. We might want to look at the approach of, and accrediting districts or buildings really isn't the winner in this, or the golden egg. It's designing a system that supports and values that systemic approach to not leaving certain buildings out there on their own, not providing the supports, the resources, that large scale which is probably the biggest success of the Kansas Learning Network, is taking that systems approach to large scale success as opposed to what we used to do in the past and just work with a building by itself and not engage feeder schools, not engage that district. So we'll continue to look at that, but we could still have it in there. But when you look at the rubric around resources, for example, that's one of them. We have districts that are modeling and how they manage their fiscal, their human, their physical resources. But the smaller you get down to the building level, the less impact or decision or involvement a building really has on that.
And that could be changed. I mean, you could have that principal have more input and to help, improve them. And another thing, let me ask, isn't this similar to North Central accreditation model? Advanced?
Yeah, North Central is now Advanced Ed. They have been at the table with us. They sit on the QP Advisory Council. They've modeled a lot of what they do after the direction that we've been going the last 3 years, but at the same time, they've been going towards district accreditation for the same reasons. Now, I think they still give the option of whether you want building or you want district, but they're headed that direction as well. But they sit on our advisory council, and honestly, this model would not change the work that they do very much at all.
I would tell you that over the last 10 years or so, when you have individual buildings that have been on improvement, parents have felt like there's an option for them with No Child Left Behind, and that is that the district has to provide transportation to take their child to another school that is accredited or it's not on improvement. And and I think this is kind of a convenient solution for the districts in that regard, because I don't see how they would be in jeopardy under this new accreditation system. Because you're going to be in the same situation like Kansas City, Missouri that was mentioned earlier today. I mean, what are you going to do? Privatize the whole thing, or you're going to have to go to Columbia or somewhere else?
There still is, and as far as I know, always will be, under ESEA, there will always be building level accountability.
Well, I'm just not seeing it in
Well-
what you're presenting under this scenario, and I think this takes the focus off of the building, in my view, and puts it on the district.
For example, all of our,
I'm with Ken here. I'm not understanding that part of it yet.
got it, and that's something we probably need to tie into this. How are buildings still held accountable? And that's still through the AMOs. Every building has AMOs, the 4 AMOs. Those are all at the building level. They're still accountable. They still have
But not to us. They're accountable to the district.
No, they're to the state.
What hammer do we have? We're not accrediting them anymore.
They,
There's no,
well, under the waiver, it's no longer improvement. There are priority, there are focus schools, there are schools that are not making progress. We still,
I need to see that part of it.
okay,
And the rubric. So,
that's a good point though, because we've been so focused on the 5 R's. We haven't spent a lot of time on the results piece, because that's all we've lived with under the past was the results. But those building level accountability results are even in there under our waiver. So.
thanks.
Sally Cobble.
Brad, I can understand the gentleman's concerns on the buildings, but also one thing that the KLN brought up and showed in many school districts were that the local boards, there wasn't an accountability piece for the decision that the boards were making for those schools. So under this system approach, that comes in to where they have to have current policies. They have to have training to know what they are. Because many times KLN found the policies in the school systems great for schools in the 19th century, but maybe not for the 21st century. And so although we were looking at building results for parents, some of the buildings were being tripped up in becoming what they should be because of the policies that were being made by the local boards, and there wasn't anything that included decision makers that blocked schools from being the best they could be. And I'm not so sure that that isn't how some of the system approach came out, to where the whole system is looked at from the policymakers, because sometimes the communities didn't even realize that they had local school board members on there that were so far behind in their thinking. And it made some difference in some towns that I had. So I can see where you're going with the system-wide approach, but I also know that our parents really like to know what's going on in that system in their schools. So I don't think we want to get that lost. And maybe in our understanding of this whole new way, we'll be able to sort it out before it's all over. Does the rubric, I know you haven't got to it yet, but is there any place in the rubric for the boards, the local boards?
Under the relevance part, there's one column called leadership, which includes the local school board, which we even had KASB help design language in the rubric about what would a modeling board look like. But I do think what's clear is we need to do a better job. We've been so focused on the rubrics and everything, being able to tie in how the building accountability still plays a role in there, how that voice, how that input, to ensure that no building could get lost, or that parents don't have clear results at the building level of performance, as well as what they're doing in parent engagement. And
Well, I think it's very important that the parents not only know what school, what teachers, they get qualified teachers, but they also have a key to know if they are actually electing people that to run the school the way they think it should be run. And I think that was missing a piece that KLN brought out into the forefront. And we need these parents to have all the tools to make good decisions. And I think we were leaving a piece out. And so I don't want to leave that piece out again.
Carolyn Campbell.
Thank you. My question is, what is the makeup of this advisory committee that you have?
Well, we have several. The main one is the QPA Advisory Committee, and that's made up of teachers, parents, principals, superintendents, higher ed. That committee's been in existence for years, and we meet 4 to 5 times a year.
That's who's making this recommendation.
That's who, they provide the recommendations to us. Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Dina Horst.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Several of the comments, questions that I have already been mentioned, but I guess it's still not real clear to me how, what part a school building plays in the accreditation of a district. Are we looking at them all collectively? And so if we have one that's an outlier, for example, the district would look really good, but they still have a big gap between one of their buildings and the rest of the buildings. Is that going to be clear in some manner?
Yeah, we actually have principals that share some concerns that there is a process being developed for this model that every building has input into the overall system. Part of the challenge of what we've lived with for so long is some principals say, yeah, but I struggle as a building sometimes getting this, so we got to make that process smoother for buildings to be able to give input without feeling that they only want to tell those higher to them what they want to hear. And that's a challenge we have, and we hear that from a lot of our buildings, and the superintendents are like, yeah, we need to make sure the process of getting input, because it cannot be a group sitting in central office filling out a form. It's got to be district-wide input on it, and we got to make sure that process is valuable and seamless, which is why the advisory council and every, when we bring the superintendents and principals and teachers in to talk about this, they have all said you have to have some teeth and accountability from a third party saying, yeah, you say it, but we don't see it. Because every building's got to be able to have input in it, but they can't, you can't let a building be lost out there. You can't have 4 high performing and 1 out there all by themselves and say you're doing a good job. No, there's got to be accountability and there's got to be voice at every level.
Well, I guess my concern is somewhat from a parent point of view. Is the parent going to know if we go to a district accreditation and I guess my concern is that much the same as Mr. Bacon's, you can hide your low performance with all of your high performance. And I think while what you're saying sounds okay from an education point of view, from a parent point of view, the knowledge that that's occurring, even through grade cards,
Yeah.
I'm not sure that parents always get that message. And the accreditation component has been maybe one of the hammers we've had. And it's not that I see this as a bad idea. I think there's good, much as Mrs. Cobble mentioned. But I think we need to make real sure that our schools, the buildings, that there's no way for a district to smooth over what's happening.
Absolutely.
In the gaps between performances. And
the building report cards that parents currently see and make those judgments, those don't change. Matter of fact, with the waiver, they're even more enhanced. So they'll still be provided that, but I'm hearing that we need to make the message clear and more of how that accountability and that parent and part of the whole process is getting those parents even more involved. Some buildings and districts do a great job. Some of them need to learn from others of what that looks like.
And currently, and I'm not sure whether it's through the accreditation process, I think it's really through AYP, that parents can make decisions. It's more through the ESEA that if they have a low-performing school that their child is attending, they can go to another school if it's happened for a period of time. Am I
That was
correct?
under No Child Left Behind. That's not.
Right. So the waiver has taken all of that away.
Yeah. Schools still have the option of doing that, but that's not a requirement under the waiver anymore. That was a requirement under No Child Left
Schools or
Behind.
districts have.
Or districts. Yeah, a school couldn't just say, I want to send my kids somewhere else. That's still a local decision now.
Okay. So that's really a waiver issue, not an accreditation issue.
Right.
Okay. Thank you.
John Bacon.
Thank you. I flipped through the presentation a little bit and cheated, I guess, but I was wondering, the rubric's not here. And then I was wondering, too, what kind of work has been prepared to determine the cost basis our system now, or doing something, giving districts an option if they wanted to go with a district-level accreditation, they could use West Ed or whoever's doing the North Central accreditation now. Instead of us having to develop this whole thing, just trying to maybe save us some money if it's already out there. And what's going to be the cost to the districts to have the visiting teams and all the work they're going to have to do behind the scenes to make sure all their buildings are doing everything they need to do. It seems like somebody should sit down and figure out what the budgetary impact will be on this change. Thank you.
Madam Chair, if I may make a suggestion. We are a little bit behind schedule, and we have guests here from another group to present another important topic. I think it's obvious from the discussion at the table that we need to come back to this maybe when we have a little bit more time as a board, make a great distinction between state accreditation, which is what we're talking about, and federal accountability. And because we've kind of mixed some messages in what we've been talking about here, So I'm not sure that the remainder of the presentation needs to be covered, because I think we need to bring this back for another time and maybe start from a different starting point as to the difference between federal accountability and state accreditation, why we even accredit schools in the first place, what's required under law to do, just kind of start from the basics and move forward. And allow our guests. We do have a very quick recommendation from the QPA Advisory Council on the accreditation status of schools that we would like you to discuss right now. We need to introduce it to you this month so we can get a vote on it next month. And it's a very similar recommendation that you did last year, which is allowing all schools to retain their current accreditation status this year, especially knowing that we have an all-new assessment coming on board. So everybody retains their status. Nobody changes based upon what happens on the state assessment results. So this is a recommended item right now, and not an information item, receive item. And next month we would have it as an action item. So I think if we could go to that, we'll come back to this much larger discussion, but I kind of jumped into that item number.
Which is the next agenda
Which is
item.
the next agenda item. Does anybody have a question about the receive item that we won't ask for action on until next month? Receive item that everybody retains their current accreditation status this year.
And actually, the recommendation is they're just accredited.
Right.
And that's what the board did last year.
Just to be clear, all schools are accredited.
Correct. And for the reasons that we listed on here, the QPA Advisory Council discussed this last meeting and wanted to bring to you the recommendation that next year in 14-15, all schools are just accredited again. And we don't use results off this spring's transitional test to make any determinations.
And according to QPA, there's 4 levels of accreditation, and with accredited being the highest level, accredited on improvement, conditionally accredited, and not accredited. Right now, all of our schools are in those top 3. We have nobody in the not accredited, or they wouldn't be here as public schools. But we have schools that technically are in those top 3 categories. To us, as a state agency, they're all accredited, and it doesn't matter what level they're on in terms of a status. It does in terms of the assistance we provide them, but that's why Brad is using the term accredited. We aren't going to distinguish between the other 3 levels for this motion, and it's the same motion you had last year at this time.
But we are just receiving this item
Correct.
now, and we would vote on it in March, correct?
Correct.
And as for our accreditation presentation, we can expect to receive more information in the near future with more specifics.
More than just the update, the 30-minute update we had
Right.
planned for today.
Well, there were just so many questions, I thought they needed to be
Absolutely.
brought out into the open. Okay.
I'm not sure it will be March, because March is really a one-day meeting, since we're the second day at the School for the Deaf and School for the Blind. So it may have to be April, and it may even be something that we want to have more of a work session for rather than a board meeting. So we can discuss that at future agenda items tomorrow.
Janet Wall. Thank you, Madam Chair. This is fine. I agree with this, and if it's a long, lengthy answer you need to give me, maybe Diane can respond through the Friday letter, the Friday note.
Yeah.
I simply want to know what the timeline we're looking at. Because if we approve this next month, we're looking at 14, 15. So are we looking at maybe getting a new accreditation model in place? I mean, do you have a timeline you could tell us?
We still think we're 2 years out for a new accreditation model, because it'll take a year to develop and get the regs all through the process. And obviously, there's still a lot of deliverables we have left to work on this. We just want to keep working on it, but we're still probably a couple years out before this model would go into effect.
Yeah, and we can even consider, as we did when we changed QPA several years ago, literally over a couple decades ago, is we could phase it in as we did before. So you phase in about, a fifth of the schools at one time and then fifth of the schools. So there's all sorts of options we can talk about there. We're not on a crunch time frame at all.
I thought, well, maybe you were expecting to.
No.
I just thought maybe you were expecting to have it done by end of 15, so we would, so it'd be, the new one would be implemented in 15, 16. That was my question.
Okay, so we ready?
Thank you very much. And I saw Cheryl Johnson walk in. She is scheduled to introduce Mark Thompson, who's going to talk about KFIT.
Yes.
Right?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Hello, everybody. Just came in from Manhattan. We had a little KSU Wildcat cheer there at the last meeting I was at. I have to say it, I'm a proud K-State alum.
Everybody have to bring that.
The K-State people
I
do, I
just
guess.
wonder where your purple is.
Well, no, that's what I was asked, actually. Anyway, it's a quick trip. The Kansas Fitness Information Tracking, or KFIT project, is a Healthy Kansas Schools project that is funded by the Kansas Health Foundation. And the Child Nutrition and Team really does appreciate the support of the Kansas Health Foundation. They are doing great things in helping us create healthier school environments in Kansas. So today, Dr. Mark Thompson, Healthy Kansas School Project Director, who has provided outstanding leadership for this project since its inception, he is going to present year one data that we are just thrilled for you to see today. Then, after Dr. Thompson's review of the data, Jeff Willett, who is the Vice President for Programs at the Kansas Health Foundation, will provide comments, and we're excited that he can join us as well. So, Dr. Thompson?
Thank you, Cheryl. And I appreciate you running long, so you gave Cheryl an opportunity to show up. So, I am excited about the opportunity to present on what we consider great news coming from a project that I've devoted a significant amount of time and energy to over the past few years, the Kansas Fitness Information Tracking project. Hopefully most of you have heard of this before. I've presented to the board several times on KFIT. But if you aren't familiar with it, again, as Cheryl mentioned, it is a Healthy Kansas Schools project funded by the Kansas Health Foundation. And as you can see, the goals are to enhance the understanding of the relationship between academic indicators and student fitness, to reinforce the importance of physical education and physical activity to the academic mission of schools, and functionally to provide an online system that allows physical educators from 900 schools statewide to use the fitness program, FitnessGram. As an overview, this is a voluntary program. It's not mandated that schools participate. It is completely up to them, and the cost is borne through the grant from the Health Foundation. We have traveled far and wide in the state. I'm a Southwest Kansas boy, so I'm very used to long miles, but have put in a lot of windshield time. Deerfield, Kansas was one of our first trainings on one of the windiest days that I remember. But I've literally been at all four corners of the state. The fitness testing, as a rule, has increasingly been incorporated into physical education curriculum. The field of physical education, your physical education professionals out there, they have prioritized this, and it's a different field than it was even 5-10 years ago. And the acceptance of KFIT and incorporation of fitness testing is a testimony to that. FitnessGram, in and of itself, the program has a very strong reporting feature, which allows for the development of individual student fitness reports. There are ones that can be that are tailored for the parent, which gives the student fitness where the student is in each of the different fitness areas, and gives some suggestions, advice. The administrators that are involved in it can develop school-wide reports and district-wide reports. And so it is one of the great features. Before I move on from that, one of the things that we've heard from physical educators is that they, for parent-teacher conferences, there's always a reason to go to the classroom teacher. There isn't always a reason to go to the music teacher, the art teacher, the physical education teacher. I know as a parent I was always wanting to see, what maybe they created in art class, and because of music programs I always had interaction with the with the music teacher. But on most parent-teacher nights there's not a whole lot of reason to go and visit the physical educator. But this, because of their ability to develop reports now, we have a number of teachers, physical educators, who are developing the reports, giving them to the homeroom teachers, and then they are starting to get visits from the parents. In terms of the data analysis, kind of building to the report that you received in your recent board materials, data is collected. We configured the FitnessGram system to work with the kids' data system. So we're collecting data as teachers, as the physical educators submit the data. Then once a year it's moved to the state server so that the data can be analyzed. We have one of our partners in this process is the Department of Health and Environment, the Bureau of Health Promotion. And they have epidemiological staff that request the data. They go through the data request review process, and then they receive the de-identified data, conduct the data analysis, and the report that you have received is what they developed. And then we collaborate with KDHE and the Kansas Health Foundation on communicating the results of the data. We ask schools to conduct 5 tests. One is the progressive aerobic cardiovascular endurance run, the PACER test, the curl up, the trunk lift, the 90-degree push-up, and the back saver sit and reach. And as you can see by the areas that are addressed, what we're really looking to do is we're wanting to develop an overall assessment of fitness. This isn't just simply collection of height and weight. It's not, a timed mile run as an assessment of an overall fitness. We're really looking at the various factors that are involved in healthy living for life. The report that you received, the data was collected during the 2011-2012 school year. The data came from 152 schools from 40 districts across the state and represented 17,000 students, and the analysis in particular looked at the data on over 13,000 students in grades 4 through 9. The results, I'm going to focus on three different aspects. There are a number of other analyses that are reflected in your report. But I wanted to cover the relationship between fitness level, students who got into the healthy fitness zone on the number of fitness tests, and their scores in terms of their reading and math scores. And what we found was that that the odds of being above math and reading performance standards were significantly higher among students who met Healthy Fitness Zone standards on all 5 fitness tests when compared to those who met Healthy Fitness standards on less than 5. So as you can see, there's a stair-step effect where the more Healthy Fitness Zones that a student is in, the greater the percentage of those students who are meeting and above standards on the reading and math assessments. And this reflected largely what we have seen in literature across in other areas. The uniqueness to our data is that we're one of the few states that have been able to link the individual student fitness data with the individual student academic data. So these associations have been seen, these relationships have been seen, but they've been in largely just aggregated data where they've taken groups of students in and looked at their, that fit a certain fitness level, and then they look at their group academic data. We also wanted to look at absences, and again what we found was that the students who met the Healthy Fitness Zone standards on 4 or 5 fitness tests on average were absent fewer days than students who met those standards on 2 or fewer of the tests. And another view that I wanted you to get was the percentage of students that are in the Healthy Fitness Zone in each of these different areas. So these are our 5 tests, and you can see the low is on the back, saver, sit, and reach, somewhere in the low 60%, to the curl up, where we have over 80% of the students that are getting into the Healthy Fitness Zone on curl ups. I was pleasantly surprised to see these results, because this provides an indication that is not necessarily widely communicated in today. We often hear about how our students are in such poor shape. I think that these results show that there are a number of students who certainly have room for improvement, but we do need to celebrate the number of students that are actually healthy and fit. So what are the implications? As I mentioned, the analyses reflect the majority of similar subject research that suggests that there is this positive relationship between student fitness and their academic performance. Another component, if you go back to the goals that I outlined, we do believe that physical education and physical activity should be viewed as assets to schools and integral to the academic mission of schools. And as with any single data point, there is certainly need to look at subsequent years of KFIT data. We are in the process, actually I should say KDHE is in the process of analyzing the second year of the data. And for that data, we have over 350 schools represented, and the last I heard was it reflected data from about 56,000 students. So a significant increase from this initial year. As I and my fellow KFIT staff do, we tend to interact with the physical educators quite a bit. Help them problem solve, try to find their students for them in the system. Just pleasantly surprised to see this unsolicited response from a local teacher recently who said, I love these tests and the fact that they will stay with the kids. Also how easy it is to send reports home to share with parents. It is a group effort. This is certainly not a one-man show. And I have a number of people in attendance that hopefully have my back. But they include Jennifer Church, who is the program manager for KDHE, Josh Mathesmeyer, who is project director here in KSDE and in Child Nutrition and Wellness, Erica Welsh, who is the senior epidemiologist who conducted the data analysis. I have several members of the IT team here because this is, it did cause Michelle Pyle to retire, but other than that, the IT team has just been phenomenal to work with here. And not in attendance, but Jeff Usher has been the person who I've worked with at the Health Foundation to help make this a reality. The picture that you see was taken the Thursday before last out at Seaman Middle School, and you will see Commissioner DeBacker there. But at the podium is Steve Cohen, who is the president and CEO of the Kansas Health Foundation. We do owe them a heartfelt thank you for the investment that they have made and the vision that they have shared with making this a reality. As I mentioned, Thursday before last, we held the launch of the release of the fitness data at Seaman Middle School. And thankfully, we chose that week rather than last week when we had so much snow. But they, as you can see, this is a large number of students. Kansas Health Foundation printed up a whole bunch of T-shirts and it was a great experience. And this is a quick minute and a half YouTube that the Health Foundation created. I don't know. Do I have sound? Guess I should have warned you. We'll start over. Okay, so
getting up at noon.
Okay, so you're going to see shots of students completing the push-ups, I think some sit and reach, and the pacer test. And on push-ups, Claudia Welch is the coordinator of the physical educators at Seaman. And one of the things that she has used are the collapsible cones that you put under a student. Because what you're trying to teach them, they are 90-degree push-ups, which means that when you get in the down position, your elbows are supposed to be at 90 degrees. So to help them recognize that, she has these collapsible cones that they can feel under their chest, so to give them an idea of when they are at 90 degrees. One of the PE or the push-up test was fantastic because they had these rows of students and they just started it and they basically went up to 50. And the kids just kept going, and some of them were just, you could tell they were just trying to stay with it, and they'd eventually drop out, but there were a number of them, boys and girls, that got up to 50.
And taking a walk around the block. For me, jogging.
Up 10, down. Up 11, down. 7, down. Up 38, down.
Katie Mulqueen.
How do you spell it?
Katymulqueen.
Awesome. And what grade are you?
8th grade.
Okay, cool.
I think exercise is a big part of being healthy, along with eating well.
I ask you to do is I ask you to get the adults that are in your lives, your parents, your grandparents, your guardians, your brothers and your sisters, to move with you as well. Grab them by the hand and say, let's go for a walk.
As I mentioned, it was a fantastic event organized by the Health Foundation and Denise and Miranda from from KDHE, and got quite a bit of publicity. I don't know how many of you saw, but Sacramento Bee picked it up. We got notice from kind of all over. But it was a great event. As I mentioned, wanted to have some time for Dr. Jeff Willett to be able to share some of what he has to say from the Kansas Health Foundation.
Thanks, Mark. And while it certainly was a team effort, we appreciate all the work that Mark did to make KFIT successful. He's a tremendous leader for that program. We'd also like to thank Commissioner DeBacker and our colleagues at the Department of Education and Department of Health and Environment for their partnership on this effort. Looking at that video, I remember when tennis shoes were white. It's like the different colors for the sneakers and the socks is pretty amazing. I'm here on behalf of the Kansas Health Foundation, but I'm also the father of 2 sons in the 7th and 3rd grades of the Andover public school system. So I certainly respect the role you play in the lives of Kansas children, and with my own sons, Addison and Gavin, by putting our kids on a path to a successful, healthy, and fulfilling life. The public education system in Kansas is essential for developing future generations that will lead our businesses, our communities, and our state. Today's young Kansans will someday serve as decision makers, comprise our workforce, and raise families. And well-educated Kansas children are the key to helping Kansas become the healthiest, most productive, most livable state in the country. As you know, those leading our education system today face enormous pressure. From funding issues to curriculum changes, from absenteeism to testing, with such high stakes and so much to achieve each school day, we're losing focus on one aspect of children's development, an aspect that, as Mark showed, plays a key role in academic performance: physical activity. We're concerned that some Kansas schools have decreased recess time and even eliminated PE in response to these pressures. We must ensure that teachers and administrators recognize how important student health and fitness are in meeting their academic goals. At the Kansas Health Foundation, we promote health and wellness in our schools, neighborhoods, and workplaces. We grow leaders in our communities, inspire decision makers, act as a voice for healthy public policy, and start and foster community philanthropy that will see our mission thrive for generations. Our belief is that a focus on a comprehensive health and wellness effort in our schools is necessary to make Kansas a healthy state, and that belief has led us to invest close to $4 million in a number of school-based wellness initiatives. This investment, largely through the Department of Education, is centered on making schools across Kansas healthy environments for our children. You've heard about our commitment to KFIT, but if you'll indulge me for a minute, I'd like to share 3 quick examples of other support we're now providing. Through Let's Move Active Kansas Schools, we've certified close to 200 physical activity leaders to help kids develop the knowledge, skills, and confidence to be physically active for a lifetime. Through Let's Move, Kansas teachers can make physical activity a routine part of the school day. We provide mini grants to schools so food service staff can receive training and schools can purchase equipment that will allow them to serve fresh fruits and vegetables. And through a new grant, we're funding KSDE to support 30 consultants who will help Kansas schools implement the Board of Education's School Wellness Policy Model Guidelines. We've been working with several organizations to review physical activity policies in schools across the country. The Board of Education's current physical activity recommendations are certainly on the right course. All Kansas students should receive at least 100 to 150 minutes of physical education per week. Elementary students should receive at least 20 minutes of active recess per day. There should be access to physical activity opportunities for children with disabilities, and information should be shared with parents to incorporate physical activity outside the school day. These are all proven components of a healthy school environment. Together, we can help Kansas schools implement the board's recommendations, even with the many other pressures they face today.
Working with KSDE and others in the education community, the Foundation hopes to learn more from principals, teachers, and parents about best practices for implementing the board's wellness policy guidelines and better understand the potential obstacles that keep schools from sticking to them. We hope to share that information at a future board meeting, and certainly we welcome the chance to come back when the board considers revised school wellness policy guidelines in a few months. At the Kansas Health Foundation, we share your mission to prepare Kansas students for lifelong success. We are passionate supporters of student wellness. Please know the Kansas Health Foundation is investing our resources to support a school culture of healthy eating and active living. Thank you again for what you do, and at this time we're happy to answer any questions, or Mark's happy to answer any questions about KFIT. Thanks.
Thank you. And I do want to underscore Jeff's point that they have made an incredible investment. And it's not just monetary, although the monetary is important. That it does involve the Let's Move Active Kansas Schools program. It does address nutrition, and it does address wellness policies. So it's multifaceted. I also wanted to acknowledge Blythe, who kind of spearheaded, just give a little wave, Blythe, Director of Communications at the Health Foundation, who really was behind organizing the Seaman event and working with her on a fairly regular basis. So, questions?
I see that Kathy Bush has a question.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you. The data is impressive. Appreciate the efforts. And this was year 1 data.
Yes.
And you're working right now on year 2 data.
Yes.
So how many years is this grant, and is KFIT going to be something that'll continue in these schools and be part of what these schools do?
We're currently in the 3rd year of the grant, and we will soon be working with the Health Foundation on extending the grant into the next year. So at the least, we are looking at having 4 years of KFIT data. I can't speak for the Health Foundation, but I'm sure that we will engage in discussions about what it will take to sustain this program. It has been extremely well received from my perspective. At present, we are at around 670 schools that have teachers who are trained on KFIT. Again, the goal is 900. But we're getting contacts. Got a contact just yesterday from Hayes, from their curriculum specialist, who wants us to come and train them. So we're growing, and hopefully it will extend beyond next year.
Okay. Well, thank you. And I think it's a great program, and thanks to the Kansas Health Foundation for their partnership in this. It's certainly, we need our kids active and healthy. So I'll be interested, and I'm guessing maybe next year we'll see another report on some data.
Yes. It took us a while to figure out the processes of getting through the first year of data analysis. We're ahead of where we were last year. So hopefully we will, by next year at this time, we would hopefully be talking about year 3 of the data, the analysis. So.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Steve Roberts.
Thank you, Madam Chair. One thing I appreciate about your data is you didn't go to the nth degree of telling us what all the inferences we can get. You made correlations, which is about all we have here with this data. Mm-hmm. And we know correlation is not causation. And I want to thank you for the opportunity for me, not that I wasn't riveted by your presentation, but I just taught myself about odds ratios. I've taught statistics, and I'd never seen OR before. Mm-hmm. So while you were making your excellent presentation, I taught myself odds ratios. Thank you very much.
We can thank Erica Welsh for that.
Dina Horst.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I, too, thank you for all of the information. It's really exciting to see that the results are as they are. And I wondered if you could, at some point, provide us with a list of schools, districts that you actually have worked with. So we have some idea of who has been involved with KFIT.
We certainly can do that. And one of our plans, now that we have the report, is to provide the report to superintendents from every district in the state and encourage those that haven't participated to this point to go ahead and participate. And again, explaining to them that it is no cost to them. It is voluntary, but now that we have data that we can share, it serves as an example of what we can find out if we have that data.
And we can encourage them to become involved as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'm reminded of a preschool program called Healthy Bodies, Learning Minds, or something like that, and it seems like that kind of tells the whole story. I think it's a great project. I did want to ask you, though, about parent information. At the beginning, are parents informed about what's going to be happening and data collection and so forth? There seems to be a distrust out there somewhere about data.
Well, the decision on whether to do fitness testing is really at the school and class level. What we are finding is that many of the teachers are actively communicating with their parents and explaining to them, this is what we are doing with in terms of what our goals are in physical education, and the parent reports are a great tool that they are able to use to convey that message. We aren't asking them to go into that explanation, other than just simply opening up the dialogue with the parents as to what they are doing in physical education and why they are doing that.
Well, I think that's critical so there won't be misunderstandings about, what the purpose is and what is actually happening there. So thank you so much. Were there other questions? Well, thanks again to the Health Foundation for the support.
Thank you very much for this opportunity.
We will take a break until 3:30 and resume our meeting at that time. I see that Scott and Susan are both here, so if our board members can return to the table, we'll continue with our meeting. Next, we have an update on teacher licensure. And Scott Myers is here, and Susan, I always say, I've been bad with names today, Helbert. Okay.
Okay, thank you for today, this portion of the meeting. We're here to talk to you about some work that's been taking place within the licensure side of teacher licensure and accreditation, our team. And as I'm sure you well know, Susan Helbert is the assistant director who leads and heads up the work on that side of the house. So we want to provide you an update where things are headed in a couple different ways, couple different areas rather. Overarching goal of the twos, of course, is providing an effective educator in every classroom. And so today's discussion with you is pinpointed toward 2.1, reducing unnecessary barriers, 2.5, flexible licensure for CTE educators, and 2.6, reviewing special education licensure requirements. So those where we'll be focusing our initial comments, and of course we'll go anywhere you'd like to with our discussion. In each one of these areas, it's not just, as I've said before, Susan and myself just sitting around drinking a cup of coffee, coming up with some good ideas. There's lots of vetting that takes place on any ideas we move forward with regs in general, but in our world, regs specifically around licensure. The Regulations Committee itself looks at the information that we bring forward on multiple occasions, and then we rework it, and we take it back again and we rework it. In my limited time here, I've yet to just have one go to the Regs Committee and it gets stamped and we move on. It just doesn't happen that way. There are people on the Regs Committee who take a deep dive and look at everything. Each one of these groups, they all take a deep dive, and that's one thing I'm really proud of in the state of Kansas. We call on the field quite a bit, but the people come, and they come with fidelity, and they come with true fervor, and they want to help, and they take it very seriously. The next group is the Professional Standards Board. So after something comes through the Regs Committee, it ultimately gets up to the Professional Standards Board, who also looks at it, and that's made up of higher ed, parent groups, LEA, in the personage of superintendents, principals, and teachers in all the different areas. Then, like I think I previously said, the parent groups, KPERC, PTA, NEA is there for all these different meetings, monitoring and partaking. The Special Education Advisory Council has been intimately involved in the licensure work or the reg work we're proposing ultimately, or we're pursuing around opening up the licensure for direct entry special education teachers. Susan has been in deep conversations with Jay Scott around the CTE and how we can make it a little bit easier for districts to provide certain class options within the buildings themselves for some of the technical areas. Obviously, the License Review Committee is also made up of practitioners, and that's that group of appeal, if you will, as if we have issues with the license. Here in Kansas, a person has the opportunity to go to the License Review Committee and basically, answer some questions. And the LRC just flat out will ask questions about, okay, you've taught X amount of years someplace. What do you know about infusing technology into the classroom? And so it gives the individual the opportunity just to talk about it. So it's that one last opportunity. Obviously, I already mentioned NEA is with us along the way. And then the program standards revision committees are centered on the work of the higher eds to make sure that we are focusing our work from pre-service all the way through. So these are the various groups that get involved with pretty much any reg that's coming down. Now, the SEAC, they don't look at the career tech and ed regs, but they look at the specific ones to their area. So it's a variety of different people, a variety of professionals who are advocates for what they do, but also advocates for teaching in the state of Kansas. And so they take a good deep dive look at everything we do. All right, to jump right into the three areas that we're looking at currently. And by the way, the reg language itself is just sitting on the ledge. We've got one little piece to figure out. Then it'll be jumped over to the attorneys to make sure that everything's kosher. So we're right. All the work has been completed in following through the right steps. For the CTE regulation, and the purpose behind this is to allow more opportunities for people at home to offer classes for students in individual areas where it's just nigh on impossible to find a fully licensed teacher. And we're looking at a concept of the permit certificate. My understanding is the idea of the permit comes out of Nebraska, but we're taking it and trying to make it a little bit better here. The idea is for an individual person in the field in a vocational area who just needs to come into the school for a couple hours a day. We oftentimes use the example of the welder because it's easy to understand it, but it fits. And so let's say we have the master welder in XYZ community, and we just are not able to find, we don't have enough need for a full-time teacher. We just don't have enough enrollment for it. But we have enough that we really need to offer these class opportunities for our kids. Yes, we have the certificate if we had enough need for the full-time person. But this would allow us to bring an individual in for just a couple hours a day. You just bring them in to teach a couple hours for us. It's almost like the flip-flop of trainer trainee or work study programs. We used to send kids out when I was a high school principal. We'd send kids out to work with a CNA, let's say, or a welder, or down at the co-op. And then the classes were run back through, or the credit was run back through the family consumer science teacher or the counselor or whatever. But they went out for an hour. All right. Well, this would allow the district to bring that teacher into the school itself. And so, and like I said, on a limited basis, on a couple hours a day. The twist on this is the request is made by the LEA. So it's made by the local district itself. They say, we have this need. We have this local need. We have all these kids who want to be involved in, pick your area, but we just don't have enough for a full-fledged person, nor can we find somebody who's fully licensed to bring in on a full-time basis. So we're going to bring this individual in for a couple hours a day, and the LEA, the district, would ask for this permit or this certificate. We'd verify the occupational competencies. So basically, not tied to 4,000 hours of having done the job, which takes place within the certificate area, or in the certificate option, but are they good at what they do? And so there are a variety of, and I don't have those in my head, but the AWS is for welding, do they have that license or that certificate? I already said it's more of a part-time assignment, and it's not, the license or the permit would not follow me as the teacher. It would be with that district. So if I am in XYZ community and I'm that master CNA and I'm willing to come in for a couple hours a day, that district would get that permit and bring me in. If I chose then to move to the next district, the receiving district would then have to, if they wanted the same program, they would go through the process of applying and getting the certificate and the permit to bring me in as well. So it fits the local need of the district. And this approach, one reason we're really excited about it, is because it does pinpoint the local needs that exist out there, and it breaks down the barriers. The olden days, saying, well, I wish I had a teacher in this area, or CNA, but they just don't exist. But, this person here is willing to come in for a couple hours a day. They're good. We can work that out. We're looking at a 3-year renewable certificate because things do change, and we want to make sure that things are taking place properly while they're there. We view this as very similar to the visiting scholar approach, yet the visiting scholar approach is done on a full-time basis. They're there throughout the entire day. This is shorter, but as far as the licensing behind it.
Scott?
Yes, ma'am.
Before you go on, who verifies occupational competency? The local district or the department?
The district would provide the verification, and what we're talking about here is, for example, maybe they want to do something that requires someone with a nursing license, so that occupational competency is that valid license. In some of the areas, there's what they call national occupational exams to verify your trade competency. A lot of the technical, the computer areas, if you will, there's business certificates or credentials that would be verified.
Well, I know there was a situation recently where the district felt like a person was competent and the department didn't, and that's why I wondered how that would be determined to overcome those issues with this new regulation.
Yeah, this is unlike the visiting scholar where there's 3 things that you have to meet 2 out of 3 criteria.
Okay.
So those are kind of more subjective. This would be, show me your law license, show me your nursing license. Do you have the whatever it is that allows you to practice as a welder?
Okay, thank you. Jim McNeese.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Might surprise you when I say this, but this looks really good. And it does. A couple of questions that maybe you'll talk about later. I didn't read ahead. Okay, but basically, I decide as a local school board and superintendent, based on a recommendation of principal on my master class schedule, I have 2 classes of welding, I have a nursing option, I have a graphic design class, I have one of the career pathways or something, and I'm in a small community. Does the size of the community, the size of the school, have any restrictions on me doing this? Or can I do it if I'm in Salina or, you know?
No, the size doesn't have anything to do. It's the
Need
need
doesn't
for
have-
that
yeah.
limited part-time, where that person is not going to quit being a welder. They're going to come in and teach this class for you, but their main occupation is still welding. They're not switching to teaching as a full-time career.
Could length of service and reputation in the community serve as a validating option?
One option that is written into the reg to verify your occupational competency is years of experience.
Okay. So I'm a local chef, and we have a cooking class we need. Okay. Another question would be, are we expecting, or would we be in any way involved with placing this person on the salary schedule? Is it whatever they can negotiate, or would... It's not our decision. I mean, I just want to make that clear. I just want to make that clear. Okay. All right. And when you say 3 years renewable, they do it for 3 years, okay, and then they have to come back and demonstrate success, or just reapply, or...
The idea, I think, is just to check, make sure their credentials are still
Right.
valid, gives the district an option to say, maybe this didn't work out as well, so, we didn't want to make it a 5-year permit.
So we could technically find somebody who's retired, or, who is, in some way, not an expert, but a highly qualified in some way. Could that person then be hired as a janitor besides doing this? You don't care?
Sure.
Either do I.
No, and actually, Jim, what I'd kind of like to hope would happen is, let's say the retired individual, they come in and they do this for 3 years on a limited basis, and it hits so well that it becomes, enrollment increases. And so then the individual looks more at the certificate, the technical certificate, allowing him or her to do it on a full-time basis then.
Just thinking out loud, not to make this more complex than it is, but have we talked to the Activities Association about any issues relative to coaches in the building? And we haven't.
Sorry.
Might just kind of talk to them about it, because that could come up.
As far as you're talking about Rule 10 versus?
No, well, yeah, there's Rule 10 versus a licensed teacher or a teacher in the building. It says teaching in the building. Maybe I'm off base on this. I'm getting a lot of...
Yeah, because the individual could...
I'm just trying to think of things down the road. As a principal, I'm hiring this person to do these things, but I've got other things that I want to do as well. And sometimes, a Rule 10 coach I can't get him as a Rule 10, but I can make him a welder and have him in a welding class, pay him an hourly rate that's maybe minimum wage, and all of a sudden I've got a coach.
Yeah, and they would be limited.
Not that anyone would ever do that.
They would be limited to the content of the area on
I'm sorry.
certificate, but as far as if they wanted to use them as a Rule 10, I mean, that's a separate, separate contract.
Just thinking of unintended consequences of this, and because I really like the idea, but it could get sidetracked by other agendas. We're trying to do what we think is best for students, and all of a sudden other things start to happen that we didn't kind of think of. Thank you, and good luck. I think this is great.
Dina Horst.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to clarify with the permit certificate. The district requests the certificate and they receive the certificate?
Correct.
Or so they hold the certificate, the person does not?
The person would be issued a permit certificate, but only it's really critical that we would not issue that without the request from the LEA.
But the person would hold the certificate?
Yes.
So could they then leave that district with that certificate and say, well, they gave me one over in such and such school district, and but the LEA in that new school district would have to request it too. So in a sense, this individual, if the schools were close enough, they could be doing work for one and work for another as well, and essentially have a full-time position only in different school districts?
I think we would have to monitor that, because at some point then, as you move away, you're no longer really in that field anymore. You've moved into full-time teaching, and we do have, the next thing we want to talk about is the restricted and then the full technical certificate. At some point we would monitor that and say, you need to apply, come under this path.
Okay, thank you.
Ken Willard.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I, too, like the idea you're talking about here, and I think it can meet some needs. But I'm not clear on the verification of the occupational competency. Are we going to see what that involves? Is that going to be subjective, or is it pretty clear cut?
It's pretty clear cut. The way the regulatory language says, they have to verify, which may include one of the following, and it's, for this one, it's occupational experience, an occupational license, and that's dependent upon what the technical area is, an industry recognized credential, a trade competency exam. So it lists about 5 things. And we tried to be, Jay Scott and I, when we talked it through, we tried to be very careful that it was an all-inclusive kind of list.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And so a person could come in under this permit as a volunteer and or to be paid, is that correct?
Well, it's up to the district.
Okay, up to the district. All right. Okay, thank you.
Okay. So revision to the restricted and full technical certificate itself, making sure that the language is aligned with the pathways, and as Susan already alluded to, she and Jay Scott have been hand in hand working on this to make sure that we're looking for the unintended consequences, because when you get into reg work, something else will pop up, of course. The ability for educators to add the new areas would be based on verification of another. So if I wouldn't just be stuck as a welder if that's, I come in for that, but if I'm also good at auto body and I've got the right credentials behind that, then possibly I could apply for and get that other certificate, allowing me to work over in this area as well. So this is the proposed regulation behind the CTE work.
I know this is a dumb question, but what's IHE?
Institutions of Higher Ed.
Thank you.
It's all right. All right, with the...
Sorry, Ken Willard.
That's all right. My next question has to do with what kind of security is there, background check, that sort of thing for people under this permit.
That's one reason why we, at first we were saying, well, maybe this could just be a permit, but we're actually going to issue the credential to the individual as a certificate, which then refers back to the requirement for a background clearance. So they would have to be fingerprinted for their first one.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Okay, with the special education proposed regulation, and basically what we're looking on is our number one waiver area in the state of Kansas is wrapped around special education. And so we're looking at some way to mitigate that. We don't believe this will just absolutely solve the issue itself, but it should chip away at it. And what we're looking at is, instead of just having the route of the waiver or the advanced classes in order to become a special ed teacher, looking at a direct entry option. So an individual would come out of college initially with a BS, thus fully licensed to be a special education teacher. Looking at 2 specific areas, the elementary would be a K-6 unified, and that person would then be eligible or licensed to serve as a fully functioning special ed teacher and or a general education assignment, so 2nd grade, 3rd grade, or a K-6 special ed teacher. For the high school, we're looking at more of a generalist. The high incident it's more of the supportive SPED role, meaning in the resource room. And the thinking behind that, of course, is there's so many different content areas across the board. It'd be awful difficult for the individual to be so well versed in any given area on the initial come through college. Now, if they want to, as they're out in the field serving in that role as a special ed teacher, and then decide, I've done this now, but now I want to become a science teacher, the individual would have the right then, or the opportunity, if they chose to go take the content test for another endorsement, just like we currently have. I'm a high school English teacher by trade, and if I wanted to become a math teacher, I can go take the test. Now, I would never pass that test, but if I could pass that test, then I could become a math teacher, the way the current regs are written. So the same situation for this particular aspect of the special ed direct entry. It'll take a while for this to make an impact, but there are individual students who come into college and this is where they want to go. They just, for whatever reason, this is their passion. They want to go work in this realm. And we're thinking as higher ed digs more into this and gets more involved with it, there will be more students who go this way. They just will. I think we'll always have the 3 routes, at least in the foreseeable future, 3 routes for a person to become a special education teacher: the direct entry, the advanced, taking more classes, and I don't think we'll get away from the waiver. We have, how many waivers last year?
Just under 500.
So quite a few waivered teachers. And it'll take 4 years, as these programs start, maybe 3 years, and it'll begin with a trickle, but it will grow. More kids will see this, and this is where they want to head. They're maintaining the different endorsement options. The special education community is changing the phraseology, the wording of the different endorsements from adaptive and functional to high incident and low incident, and we'll be giving you more information on that as we move down. This is just a precursor to get a little advertisement for you, if you will, preview. That's work taking place within the special education community right now.
Kathy Bush has a question.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Looks like you've got some good ideas here. And whether elementary or 612, let's say elementary, that person then, and thinking back of old terminology, that person would generally be in a pull-out type classroom or a class within a class type classroom, or could be either?
It could be either.
Okay.
It'd be a full-functioning special ed teacher.
And then for the 612, that's a high incidence. So I'm assuming that's going to be more of a pull-out type.
More the resource room.
Okay.
And so the individual student would go there during third hour.
Okay.
To get assistance with math.
So the generalist wouldn't necessarily, for secondary, wouldn't necessarily be class within a class type, or could it be?
It could be. Yeah, it could be.
Yeah, because I could see need for both.
Sure.
Okay, all right. Okay, thank you.
Just with the elementary, we wanted to create the situation where the individual, as they graduate, they go into the special education world, and then they just decide, this isn't for me.
Mm-hmm.
Well, they want to be holding some eggs at the end of the day, so they can move back over to the general ed population, go into 4th grade. And it's just pragmatically, at the high school level, truly, I could study science till the cows come home, and I should not be teaching science. But I could do English, and I could do social studies.
But then it allows you to get into a content area should you choose by testing.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Sally Cobble.
Thank you. I really appreciate the work you guys have done on this. Our schools of education, have they signed on to this concept too? How far are they away from being able to redo their curriculum to where this would happen, or?
Well, that's why I said I think it's a 4-year. I mean, they're always looking at their program standards, but nobody. And KU has been doing a pilot on this.
Yeah, they may even submit an innovative kind of program prior to when we have everything in line to go through regular program approval.
Well, I wondered if we had to do anything on our end to accredit them, those schools of education.
And
or
differently.
Differently, yeah.
So to speaking into the mic. Yeah, eventually, those that decide that they want to do this, offer this program, or both of these or one of these programs, will be submitting programs for review, and then you'll be approving those through that regular process.
So we go through the entire program review process and
Right.
dovetail into their accreditation.
Okay, so when do you let them out to the schools that this would be a possibility that for licensure, so they know when to start working on it?
The next set would be to start working on a set of program standards. And we've had committees that are working on revising all those program standards that the universities use to build their programs. And the one that worked on adaptive and functional, that those standards for those current programs have already started thinking about this. And KU is, as Scott said, piloting is a good word. So that institution is ahead of the game, but we're working with them now.
And we've been in conversation with higher ed just about the concept and throw it against the wall, see what they think. And everyone's open to the idea. Thus far, everyone. It's been accepted as this is a good idea. Now, if an institution chooses not to jump into it, that'll be on them, and it's their choice.
And we do have a precedent in the Early Childhood Unified, where it's gen ed and special ed.
Moving on. All right, and then the final one for today is the barriers from out of state. And this deals specifically with the alternative route completers. And this really, it comes down to, I know we've talked to you previously about this, and this is a lot of the people who go before the LRC come to us from the alternative routes from out of state. Quite a few do. And as when I first came around and started digging into this issue, I had people ask me, a person came from pick another state and they've taught successfully for 8 years. Why will we not give them a license? Why not? And so then I look at them and say, well, it's a good question. But then I say, what if they taught in 8 different districts in 8 years? And so, yeah, I had not thought of that, because that might not be successful teaching. Maybe it was, maybe it wasn't, but there's some place for 8 different reasons. So, but we started looking at it and saying, okay, but what could we do? How could we broaden this and make this, remove that barrier, if you will? And so we started messing around with the ideas, and we looked in Kansas. An individual becomes tenured after X amount of years. If you receive your 4th contract, or you don't lose your contract after your 3rd, you receive tenure in the state of Kansas. So we started throwing that around, talking about it. And we went to the regs committee, originally said, if that becomes part of the definition of success, is they've been at an assignment for a period of time, then why would we not at least think about that, as people are coming into Kansas? So the regs committee said, well, what about 8 years? I've taught for 8 years in pick your state, and in the same district, maybe not the same assignment, because I taught sophomore English and then senior English, but in the same district, maybe not the same high school, but the same system for 8 years. Is that good enough? So we said, well, let's work with that. We can mess around with that. They have 8 years someplace else. So we brought that forward, and the Professional Standards Board talked about it, looked at it. At some point in time along the way, it morphed more into, well, let's look at 5 years. 5 years under a standard license, whatever standard license is in that state, whatever that means there. And they had 3 continuous years in that LEA. They came to us. And so Susan, being the good thinker she is, said, well, I wonder, how would that match up with when we get the appeals to the LRC? What does that look like? And so now you have some actual statistics here. Of the 200 plus or minus appeals that came to the LRC in the last year or so through the alternative route completion, 56 would have met this criteria. So they would come in and said, there's your license. Be 56 of them. 44% would be able to bring their license from pick your state because they were there for 5 years, 3 consecutively or continuously. LRC generally approves those anyway, because truly when the LRC comes together, they truly boil down to the minutia of talk to us about accommodations. They get down into the standards of teaching, professional ed standards, say, what do you know about, Janet, what do you know about accommodations? And so Janet has an opportunity to say, well, I do this, 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 and this. And based on the response, the LRC says, okay, that's good enough. Here you go. Here's your license. You answer all these questions well enough. Or they say, you know what, you probably need to get some classes behind this concept, whatever it might be. And we also look at the testing and say, you didn't take this test there, and you need to take it here in Kansas. Well, with this proposed reg, all that would go by the wayside. We'd just say, you know what, you were successful there. Come on in. So this is an approach to bringing in out-of-state people.
Is this an and or an or? 5 years under standard license and 3? And, not or?
No.
Okay. Steve Roberts.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You don't have to go to Teachers College to be a great teacher. That's what I shared with my fellow board members before we were sworn in. And that's not an opinion, that's fact. The opinion I want to share with you is that teaching is not union work. That's just an opinion. I mean, you can't prove that one way or another. But it's not up for me to convince you. It's up to me to convince some of my fellow board members that you don't have to go to Teachers College to be a great teacher. Now, when I see alternative licensure and people tell me, oh, Mr. Roberts, that problem's been solved. Oh, professionals can come in. We can welcome a doctor to teach biology. Sure. They can start teaching today. Problem solved. All he has to do is go back to school for 2 or 3 years and satisfy your regs, or our regs. This is a hindrance to quality education. And I'm here to fight the fight that you don't have to go to Teachers College to be a great teacher. Now, having said that, we need licensed professionals in every classroom. And I'm not going to even suggest that we put the colleges of education out of business. In fact, if we do this right, people like Rick Ginsburg ought to have more on their plate, not less. We need pedagogy for early primary. We probably need a special sort of preparation of teachers who teach those later primary and intermediate grades. But with Almighty God as my witness, for teaching secondary courses in technical subjects, to make professionals go to a teacher's college to prove to you and to our state that they're worthy is unconscionable. It is stupid and it is cruel. You don't have to go to Teachers College to be a great teacher. I'm going to beat that thing till we get it done. And I think we can get it done this year. I really do. I think if we voted on it right now, I'd lose 6-4. Thank you.
Sally Cobble.
Thank you. Okay. So I sit here today, and I like the special ed. I like the barriers of out of state. I think we've made a lot of headway on those. Kind of brought them back in a manner I agree with. Okay. Now, tell me what we're going to do from here so that the field can use this. Is this our first reading of the regs?
No. We have, like I said, we've got one more wording issue to fix, and then we'll turn over the information to the lawyers, who then make sure everything's kosher. And then from there, I've never been through a reg change.
Will we get it to this legislation by, while they meet? I mean, will you get it back to us to where we can send it to the regs during this legislative session?
Just clarification, a reg change can happen anytime. It doesn't have to happen during a legislative session.
It doesn't.
Because
Okay.
regs committee meets year-round. So we aren't in a crunch to have this done within the 90 days of the session. The process would be, we have our attorneys look it over for the wording to make sure that it's correct, and then it starts going through the process through the rules and regs. And that can take anywhere from 3 months to 6 months or longer, depending on what the feedback is. So
I was just hoping that the schools would have it to their availability for hiring for next year.
Is that what you're aiming for?
We're aiming for it.
Hopefully.
Kathy Bush.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Looking at the alternative, I think we've got a pretty good option, but
There we go. I think we've got a pretty good option for folks who have been in a site for a while. And it looks like to me that 142 out of the 200 were based on the appeals were based on the alternative route. Is it 56 out of the 142 or 56 out of the 200?
Out of the 142.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
It's not clear on there.
Okay. So quite a few of them that would have met their needs as far as the alternative license. At that point, do we then, depending upon how the data continues to come in, do we then look and see, because if 44%, I assume that's 44% then, is that the percentage, okay?
Right.
Then do we look at the other 56% and say, is there something we need to do to support them?
I think it's only right to continue the conversation and continue looking at the information, the data. Continue. Yeah, absolutely. Not that we're a great. I don't know why we're not a great importer of people to Kansas. I want to come to Kansas, stay here, but there will be people moving here.
Right. Sure.
And so we do need to see, what happens to that percentage.
Mm-hmm.
How many people, if this ends up being, we end up going down this road, it truly just does away with a whole slew of work.
Right.
And we say, well, where else could that grow?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a good step. I would anticipate there will be another step once we get this one in place to look at, which is good.
I guarantee we'll look at it.
Yeah.
We need to look at it.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Just to follow up, the ones that were not in the 44% that would automatically be licensed, the LRC would still be in place to provide guidance for the others. Okay.
Absolutely. And along those lines also, I do want to mention, Susan, and through her direction, is we're doing we're working very hard on streamlining the process of the LRC.
Thank you.
And getting it so that it's a far more user-friendly.
Yeah.
If you will, for the clientele, for the LRC itself, for us, for the field. I mean, we're just trying to make it easier.
When I looked at all those indicators, it was overwhelming. So, okay. Now, Dina Horst.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Looking back at the proposed regulations for CTE, when a full technical certificate would need to be renewed, have we thought about what kinds of things, of events, of
trigger?
I can't think of the term, but anyway, what we would accept as showing that they had continued to study in their field or work in their field and advance. For example, a welder. I remember hearing a welding teacher who actually is a certified teacher, who said, I worked during the summer as a welder. Could that then help them become recertified?
Right now, when you see the regs, the section that says, what do you have to do to renew that full technical certificate, those are 5-year certificates, so they're coming in every 5 years. And right now, the language is professional development points, just like a teacher on a professional teaching license. The difference in theirs is it does say that some of those professional development points, if you will, have to be earned by professional learning opportunities in their particular field. So it doesn't dictate, but it does say every year we expect you to do something to stay current in your field.
So the PDC locally could make those determinations.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Ken Willard.
Thank you, Madam Chair. In that regard, this was not my original question, but in my business life, I had to get what was it called?
Continuing education.
Continuing education had to be completed every 2 years for me to maintain my license. So in that case, would that continuing education completion be sufficient to recertify this person?
The PDC could certainly award points for any activities related specifically to earning CEUs to maintain that occupational credential.
You give points for it, but that wouldn't be sufficient.
It might be, because if you're talking about 160 or 120 professional development points, depending on how much CEUs you do directly related to that occupation, it could be sufficient.
It could contribute to the relicensure, but it may not be the entire part of the relicensure.
Okay, I'm not clear on what it takes to be permitted get this permit, or what it requires to maintain it. And my question earlier was how objective or how subjective is this? I don't want it to be subjective any more than absolutely necessary.
The permit certificate, essentially that's just if you want to renew it, you submit the application. But the full technical certificate, those are for those people that have switched. Now they're teaching full time. And so they maintain that full certificate every 5 years. So that's who we're talking about having to do professional development points. But for the permit people, those part-time limited people, we didn't really impose any renewal requirements within the reg for those people.
Okay, all right. Can you, I'm going back to the alternative completer category. Tell me who that would be, and a couple of examples.
By definition, an alternative completer is somebody who did not go through a higher ed institution, or the program that they were delivered did not address both content and professional ed or pedagogy. So a couple of examples. If you went through University of Phoenix, an online program, and you had a degree in biology, you went through University of Phoenix program 4, which was just the professional ed, you're fine, that's not an alt route. If you went through one of the Texas programs where it's a company that delivers some online modules, you do those modules in a week, and you have a degree that's not related to what you want to teach, that would be an alt route.
Okay. So where would somebody like who's with Teach for America fall in here? Is that an alternative route?
Teach for America, in many states, they go back through a university and complete professional ed. So if that person, again, they have a degree in, we'll use biology, they did their 2 years under Teach for America, and they completed professional ed coursework through University of Missouri, UMKC. That's similar to what our restricted license is, our alt route. They, by definition, wouldn't be an alt route completer.
I see.
But if you have someone, a degree in human resource management, and in another state, they took a test to become licensed in biology and may or may not have had any professional ed, that would be an alt route completer.
So what part of this change that's being considered captures a person who has been teaching in Teach for America and is unable to get a license here?
In Teach for America, again, a lot of those probably aren't alt routes, but say that program was for them, but they've been teaching for 5 years and it's all been at the same district, we would go ahead and be able to issue them the license. They would not have to go through that extra step for LRC.
Okay. The 5 years is the key.
Yes, it's that 5 years under his
What is a normal
license.
tour with, I don't know why Teach for America is coming to my mind, but I don't know much about that. What is a normal tour for them? Is it?
To begin with, Teach for America, you have to do, I believe it's a 2-year commitment, but many of them decide to stay in the classroom.
Okay. So there wouldn't be very many scenarios where a person would, Teach for America would have 5 years of experience.
It depends. We get very few Teach for America people coming into Kansas, so they tend to stay where they did it.
Okay. Okay. Well, I'm appreciating the effort here. I'm just not sure it's gone far enough yet. But right now I don't have the right questions to ask you, so thank you.
Steve Roberts.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Let me begin with an apology for my fervor on this issue. I think I owe an apology to everybody in this room. I was alternative route. I was considered alternative route because my degree was not in math. It was in engineering. I have a Bachelor of Science in Electrical Engineering. And I knew that I would retire to a classroom one day. So between engineering projects, I would teach. And I did a lot of teaching at the community college. It counted for nothing. My engineering degree counted for nothing. I had a tutoring business that I started about 1997, 98. That counted for nothing. And then when I got my master's degree, I took 2007 because I knew that I was onto something about making education work better for poor kids. You don't necessarily have to have the pedagogy at certain points in our trip from cradle to high school graduate. So I knew I was onto something, but I kept screaming at the system from the outside. People would invite me in and thank me, but then I couldn't bid for a real teaching job because I didn't have a license. And I lost the best job I ever had because North Central said unless I got licensed, the school I was working at would lose their accreditation. So I've got that little story for another time. And I don't want to make this about me. I really don't. But I've got personal experience that says, you know what, this entire process, you need to take a step back from this entire process and say, maybe we should welcome people into our classrooms. Instead of just putting up barriers, instead of saying, well, we really don't want just anybody coming into the classroom. We want to make sure that we have good educators because our children come first. And what people hear when I make my points is, did you hear what Robert said? He thinks anybody can teach. Folks, that's what we have now. If you can endure the inanity of this system, you can get your license. And then by law, and I appreciate what you said, Scott, about how you wouldn't pass the math test, but by law, if you kept your license current and I let mine lapse, you're more qualified to teach trig or calculus than I. That's by law. We need to revisit these things. And so in order to get my alternative certification, and I didn't go to University of Phoenix, I went to Grand Canyon University. It's like, well, no, you need extra documentation, Mr. Roberts. We don't know if they're legitimate. So I got a letter of recommendation from somebody that I tutored her daughter. And it was the Supreme Court Chief Justice of the state of Missouri. I've shared that letter with my fellow board members. And in the interest of time, I'd like to share it with you another time. Because you need to look at this letter. It makes me sound like a pretty good math teacher. And we need to be more welcoming to people who have professional credentials. This entire process of, well, no, you got to satisfy the law first because we're protecting our children. We actually end up with more children dying on the vine because of this protection. We need to be more welcoming, a little more trusting, and I need to be more professional in my pronouncements on this board. I realize that. My apology is sincere. I feel very passionately about this. And I know in my heart that if we just accept that some teachers in some academic areas can teach well without going through the toll booth of teacher licensure at a state-approved college of education, we'll have a better service and product for our citizens. Thank you very much.
I believe we are taking steps forward, and I appreciate what you've done to help us do that. We had expressed concerns in these 3 areas, and you've gone to a lot of work to figure out ways that we can begin moving in that direction. So thank you. Did you have more to present? Or?
Just some additional proposals.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. The teacher leader endorsement, this is just low-hanging fruit as far as I'm concerned, had a sunset date, and so we're looking to extend that because if we didn't, then that option would go away. And to me, that's part of the answer down the road, is we're asking more and more of the principals to be instructional leaders. The capacity, the management issues don't go away. It's important to have that teacher leader endorsement in place. We're looking to restructure the leadership license regulation to basically saying they need to have been a teacher from, instead of just 3 years, 5 years. That's a requirement with the teacher leader endorsement, by the way. So it gets those 2 in line. And having gone from being a building principal to superintendent, or from a teacher to principal first, there are some high flyers. They're ready to, after 3 hours, but that's an outlier. You have to live through the wars twice. You've got to go through it for a period of time, just breathing the air to be ready to move into principalship. And like I said, it lines up with the requirements for the teacher leader. And the other thing, you'd have to complete the building leader program prior to moving to the district world. Doesn't mean you have to go actually get the license. Doesn't even mean you have to take the test. But you have to have completed the classwork in order to move into the district world. The final thing is, and this is from on high, as you well know, we accredit the colleges of education. The NCATE and TIAC have merged at a federal level or national level, and they've created a new group called CAPE. And so we're aligning all of our standards and processes to that new organization's work. That's a multiple year experience. I think they formally put their information into the DOE last year, and they said, well, 7 years. It'll take a while. Well, we're working toward that. And we're elbow deep with our friends in higher ed to make sure that they're intimately aware of this, but we continue to talk about it as far as what differences does it really make. And it's a scrunching of some of the standards, but it does put an emphasis, and I believe rightfully so, by the way, on the clinical experience, so that teachers, when the day they walk across the stage, are learner ready day one. Because with the current situations in school, we don't have the leisure of when I began teaching back in '87, where you figure it out over the first couple of years. They need to be ready now, and so there's a much greater push on the clinical experience. And as a matter of fact, we are deep into a state alliance on that work in a national perspective. So these are also coming, but they're not the big rocks that you wanted to hear about. Just wanted to at least mention them to you, so you know they're there.
Okay. Sally Cobble has a question.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I had a phone call this week on AP instructor. Somebody from the high school had been doing the AP subject for years for this school system. And the community college in that area had hired this person also, I think. Or, no, that was dual credit. Anyway, does the AP part now require that if you're going to teach an AP class that you have to have a master's?
I don't know.
And has that been a long time?
It's not the state requirement. Advanced placement has certain requirements on which instructors they will allow to teach their classes.
And that's those same rules or guidelines have been there for a while?
As far as I know.
Okay, so what about, let's go back to the dual credit. If somebody's taken dual credit, did K-Board now say that for a teacher to teach, like the high school teacher was being hired by the community college to do dual credit, but now they said she can't because she didn't have a master's. So, did that change?
not on our end. I mean,
You don't know anything about that?
I know back when I was in the field, we had dual credit courses, and as a requirement, we worked with Highland, and that was something they told our teachers in order to teach for concurrent credit for Highland college comp, they had to have a master's. But that was coming from Highland. It wasn't coming from-
Well, it goes back to a long thing that Ken and I have gone back and forth on the fact that in the high school level, we ask them to have pedagogy, but yet on the community college level, they can teach with a master's and no pedagogy, but then we get into these dual credits, and I think we have different regs.
Sally, I think
that
the community colleges control that requirement, and many of them require their instructors to have masters.
Right.
Okay.
I understood
All right.
that, but it came into the dual, when we do things dual.
Yeah, but yeah, okay.
That, I just wanted to know if you knew anything. It was a phone call I got, never mind.
Are there other questions before Scott introduces the next presenter? Okay.
Okay. Oh, this is Becky. All right, it is my pleasure. Another facet of the work of TLA is to introduce to you Nicolette Geisler. Nicolette serves very well, very aptly, as the Executive Director of the Kansas Volunteer Commission, of which Jim is a member of the commissioners, or ad hoc, or he represents the board in that capacity. So I'll turn it over to Nicolette.
Good afternoon. Let me pull this up real quick. Okay. So good afternoon or evening. Thank you for allowing us to come present to you on the good works of the Kansas Volunteer Commission. Some of you may be wondering what exactly we are. So to start off, we're a state service commission. State service commissions were created in 1993 by the National Community Service Trust Act. We are a governor-appointed commission. We were created here in Kansas in 1993 by Governor Finney, and in 2003 we changed our name to the Kansas Volunteer Commission. Let's do that. So, state service commissions are in every single state in the country. So I'm going to talk to you about what it looks like here in Kansas. So state service commissions are housed within state government, and that can be with the governor's office, lieutenant governor's office, two departments of corrections. Here, it's in the Department of Education, and we're glad to be here. Specifically, we're on Scott's team, TLA. As a state service commission, we leverage Corporation for National Community Service funding. That's a federal agency. So we do receive and then leverage federal funding. So we're a sub-grantee of CNCS, but we sub-award a majority of those funds out. And I'll talk to you about what that looks like. So what exactly do we do? Oh, I forwarded it. Apologize. Our mission is simple yet inherently complex. We empower all Kansans to meet community needs through service. We do that through three different roles. We administer the AmeriCorps state programs. We distribute grants through our Volunteer Generation Fund, through Kansas Mentors background checks, and through a variety of mini grants to support National Days of Service. We develop and communicate a statewide vision of service and foster an ethic of service throughout the state. So considering that first point, what is AmeriCorps? Do I have any AmeriCorps alums in the room by any chance? No? Okay. You're an alum. Oh, perfect. Yes, Sherry's here. Great. So we have an alum. That's two of us in the room. For those of you who don't know what AmeriCorps is, the way we start this conversation is we ask you to think of it like Peace Corps, but here in America. So hopefully that conjures up some images of folks giving back in meaningful ways, meeting daunting needs, right? It's just like that, but here in America. In Kansas, it's a national service program that allows Americans to give back in meaningful ways. They provide direct service through local organizations, meeting local needs. Those needs range from education, disaster preparedness, economic opportunities, healthcare, you name it, it runs that gamut. To get involved with AmeriCorps, organizations must apply to become an AmeriCorps program. Once granted, they become a program, and then they are allowed to leverage AmeriCorps members. It's pretty straightforward, right? Members are not employees and they're not volunteers. It's really important to note this. They are in fact members. They've committed to a term of service. They are also given the opportunity during that term of service to earn a small education award and a small living stipend. Nobody gets rich off of being an AmeriCorps member. If you're a full-time member, you earn about $800 a month. So it is pretty small. It's just so that you can give back without having to worry about maybe feeding yourself. So how's the KVC involved? Pretty logical question. Our first responsibility regarding AmeriCorps is that we host that competitive grant competition that then determines which AmeriCorps state programs are in our state. So it is a competitive competition. As part of that competition, you as the Board of Education, you all definitely approve those grants. So we host the competition, submit it to our commission, and then submit those recommendations up to you all. It should be noted that all of our AmeriCorps funds are strictly passed through. We don't keep any of those funds, nor are we allowed to, but it goes straight to the field. So it comes from CNCS to the KVC out to the field. The second piece of AmeriCorps is that we are responsible for oversight, monitoring, compliance, technical assistance, and training. Essentially, it's our grant that we've subawarded, so we're responsible for the outcomes of that. So let me give you a small snapshot of what it looks like in Kansas right now. If you go back to our previous program year, 2012-2013, we had approximately 11 AmeriCorps programs funded at about $1.25 million, and they leveraged 129 AmeriCorps members. I mentioned earlier that our programs run the gamut in the areas of focus, though you'll see in our state that a majority of them do focus on K-12 education. Examples of those types of service that those members are providing range from mentoring and tutoring to working with communities and schools in this particular year to service learning projects. In 2013 and 14, we have 10 programs at approximately $1.3 million, and they hope to leverage 175 AmeriCorps members. Again, you'll see a majority of our programs fall within K-12 education. That's not all that we do. We actually have 3 programs. So we have AmeriCorps, we have Kansas Mentors, and we also have something called the Volunteer Generation Fund. Kansas Mentors, and this is Sherry to my right, she's our director of Kansas Mentors. Unlike the name, like what it might sound, is not a mentoring program, it's actually a mentoring partnership. We partner with close to 175 youth mentoring programs throughout the state. We serve as a resource center, we provide funding, we have set up the quality mentoring system, and we'll go over that in a second. And we focus on developing and promoting high-quality mentoring and raising awareness about mentoring. So one of the most important pieces of Kansas Mentors is the Kansas Gold Star program, and that is the QMS system, the quality mentoring system. This is a really key piece of what Kansas Mentors does. Not only does it recognize high quality and safe mentoring programs, it also provides technical assistance and training to help emerging programs meet those basic minimum standards of safety and quality. It should be noted that state of Kansas employees, Gold Star programs are the only programs that state employees can leverage their 90 minutes per pay period in mentoring, so it must be with a Gold Star program. So we mentioned safety, and it's always kind of in the back of our heads, particularly after something like Jerry Sandusky. One of the things that's really important that Kansas Mentors does is that we're allowed to provide some reimbursement for background checks for our mentors. So through a grant through Volunteer Kansas, we have $130,000 to reimburse mentoring programs for the cost of background checks on mentors. It doesn't cover all of it, but it sure makes a little bit of a dent. Then we can have really great programs, high quality, but if we don't have the mentors, it doesn't do us any good. So one of the things that Kansas Mentors participates in is its signature event called the Coaches Challenge. In 2006, Kansas Mentors was created, and we were headed up by Coach Bill Snyder out of K-State. He is still actively involved, serves as the chair on the advisory council. And in 2008, he had this really great idea to challenge the state of Nebraska to see which state can recruit the most new mentors. Since then, we have grown to 5 states. I'm happy to say that Kansas is the reigning champion since 2008. And in total, we have recruited approximately 26,000 mentors through this campaign. Now, obviously, it's not about the fact that we win, but it's kind of fun to say. We're also the lead for National Mentoring Month in January, so we're the lead in the state of Kansas. So our third and final program that I'll talk to you about today is the Volunteer Generation Fund. This is a new initiative through the Corporation for National Community Service. We are one of 19 states to receive this competitive grant. We are in the fourth year of that grant, so we've received approximately $750,000. To date, $500,000 of that has gone out the door to the field, mostly awarded to volunteer connectors. It's a two-pronged approach with this grant. We sub-awarded those to volunteer connectors to help them develop their initiatives and meet their needs in their communities. But we also decided to incorporate a professional development and learning process to that to help develop and strengthen the infrastructure of the state. So discussing those sub-awards, we had 11 volunteer connectors over the last 4 years that have been awarded VGF funds. Collectively, to date, they've leveraged 18,000 volunteers that have served approximately 250,000 hours. In regard to that professional learning and development piece, we established the annual Kansas Conference on Service and Volunteerism. It's a relatively inexpensive way for our nonprofit organizations and public entities to network, to share best practices, and to learn new trends. We typically charge between $50 and $75 for this. I mention this because on the national level, it's upwards of $800 to attend their conference. So it's something that's really affordable for folks here in Kansas. In addition to a one-time event once a year, we have initiated a series of regional trainings where we go across the state. We've done that from Dodge City to Kansas City multiple times a year. We provided a total of 15 trainings throughout the state and have really exposed 500 volunteer managers to volunteer management topics. So to get all of this done, we have commissioners that are governor-appointed, and we also have staff. As Scott mentioned, Mr. Jim McNeese is a governor-appointed commission representing you all. Our commission really serves as the visionaries for the commission. They set the tone, they set the vision, they set the direction. Staff, such as myself and Sherry, we also have Nathan Crispin, who's our AmeriCorps program officer, and Amanda Knoll, who's our assistant, who keeps us all buttoned up and on track. We're the ones that carry out those day-to-day activities. We are here at KSDE, and we are staff here at KSDE. So in a nutshell, and I think that was about 10 minutes, is the Kansas Volunteer Commission. So now I'd like to host any questions.
Are there questions? Jim McNeese?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, over a year ago when I was appointed, assigned to the Kansas Volunteer Commission, I had little idea of what they did. Basically, I'd never heard of them. I don't think. Maybe I did. I couldn't remember. And then after participating with them over the course of this last year, participating at meetings as well as at the conference, I became keenly aware that this was kind of a stealth group, that they fly under the radar. We don't hear much about them. And even Nicolette didn't really laud the achievements that they have, recognitions. You want to tell them about that?
Right, so we're not completely responsible, though we think we had a good hand in it. We moved from number 7 in the country to number 4 for volunteerism, and that happened just this last year.
Yeah, and the league, the coaches, that's an expanding opportunity as well. And taking the lead, Kansas has been the lead, and Coach Snyder especially, in terms of bringing this, to Nebraska and to Iowa and to the Big Ten. You're going to see that expand. The group, the Volunteer Commission, has done excellent work, and I want to say to Nicolette and to the other commissioners and to the staff, they've done a great job, and they do it very quietly. They go about their business, and they do great things with great impact within our communities. And so thank you very much. It's been a joy to be involved with you, and really an honor to learn about what you've done over this last year. So thank you.
Thank you.
Carolyn Campbell.
Thank you. I have a question. Didn't you say something in that 10-minute span about communities and schools?
Sure, yes.
So could you explain how you volunteer with them, please?
So in the previous program year, they were a grantee of ours, and I believe they were for about 5 years, and they've taken a break. So they were in an AmeriCorps program. Last year they had 5 AmeriCorps members. And so they placed their members in various sites across the state, so 1 member per site. Their members were primarily involved, if memory serves correct, in connecting students to their services, mostly level 2 services. So they either provided those services or connected to them based on their program model. So AmeriCorps, the way we like to think about it, and maybe in this aspect, is that it's a people grant. While we give them money, it's to leverage people to do the good work that they need to get done. Does that answer your question?
Yes, I guess that was my question. I didn't know if it was just funds that you sent, but you actually have staff that you've identified.
We send funds, and then they find the members themselves. So they use the funds to find the members.
Okay. Do you know about how much money was involved in that?
Off the top of my head, no. 5 is pretty small, so under 100,000. But off the top of my head, I don't.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Other questions? Well, thank you very much for being so patient and staying with us until late in the day. You're doing good work, and we appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your time.
Now, in the interest of time, since we're running a little late, we have made an executive decision to skip over the ESEA waiver and have Brad do that tomorrow. Are your feelings hurt, Brad?
You know, I'm always at the end of the day for buffer, trying to catch you back up, so I can do that tomorrow.
Okay, thank you very much, because we do have an executive session later.
If anybody wants, I'll be hanging out later.
Thanks.
Need a buffer?
So moving on, Dale Dennis is our next presenter. He's going to talk about legislative matters.
Slow progress. I just walked in the door, the State House. There's been very few, if any, bills that's come out of the House or Senate Education Committee to date that I'm aware of. A lot of discussion. There could be some by the end of the week, but I believe that there's a good chance that they may work personal financial literacy in the House before the week's out. I know the agenda may not show that, but I think that's highly likely. The agenda, I think, will show, too, there's going to be a roundtable discussion of superintendents. Some of you may have looked at that on at-risk. Get the real people in the field. There's a lot of them gone, and I guess, and so it's not likely that that's going to take place. I think they canceled that, and I think we'll probably work personal financial literacy. They've talked an awfully lot about at-risk, a lot. I thought Craig and I kind of come up with just a brief summary of the bills that we think there may be action. If you want to talk with others, you can, but there just hasn't much happened. But 264 on your sheet, the single sheet, I've tried to summarize it in a little over a page. If anybody builds a new school or did a major remodeling of a current facility, this bill requires you to provide for storm shelters. And we did the fiscal note on that. I don't think it's going to cost that much, and the reason is because about everybody's doing it. The local boards care about their kids, big time. And so I don't know of any new schools that we've looked at recently that hasn't included storm shelters for their kids. 277, this bill's pretty important. And you remember when you compute the local option budget, you use the base of 4433. In other words, the base for school age really 3838, but this special law allows you to use 4433. Well, that provision of the law expires June 30th of 14. So this is the last year. This extends it 5 more years. If this does not pass, it would cut expenditures over $100 million. Over $100 million. Because you drop back and compute the LOB at 3838 rather than 4433. 305. This provides that there will be no bond interest state aid on new bonds after June 30th of 2014. But the bill provides, it's kind of difficult to get through all that in that bill, but it provides you compute state aid as if they had passed. And you have this magic pot of money and you move it over to the LOB state aid. With me? Okay, not with me. All right, let me try again.
You said they compute them as if they had passed.
Mm-hmm. So let me give you an example. If a school district had a bond issue.
Not as if they passed, as if they were going to get aid.
Yeah, as if they were going to get aid, but they have to pass first.
Okay, so I've got to be clear on this because I've had a lot of questions. This is for school districts who now may, if they were doing it after that date, they have a bond issue, it passes, but they don't get state aid.
No state aid.
But they compute what it would have been?
No, they won't, we will.
Well, you will,
We'll compute what it would have been, and then we add it to the state supplemental general state aid.
As if they had paid, as if we...
So, if no school districts go ahead and work on and pass bond issues after that date,
Yep.
then there would be no money.
No additional money.
No additional money.
Unless the legislature decide to appropriate more. See, we're prorating that at about 78%. Now, and this is a big issue. That's very important. And if you're in a wealthy district, let me just pick Burlington, the power plant. They don't get any. They're very wealthy. Okay? But you have another district down in your area, I know, because he called the next day after this bill was announced, and they're going to have plan to have a bond issue in about a year. Well, he'll get no state aid. So when he called, he said, I can't make it without some help. The property tax would be too high. But if he did have one, and it passed, we'd compute the state aid, and we'd add it to the LOB for the whole state, not for him.
Thank you.
Okay. 335. This, Craig and I had trouble with this one. And you may have talked about this. On or after January 1st of 2015, local boards will implement a reasonable suspicious drug screening program. So if you believe somebody is using drugs inappropriately, well, then you can require them to be tested. And if they're tested, as I recall, that don't mean you can fire them on the first go round.
But it doesn't mean you can't.
No, that it says what it provides that something to the effect that you can't. That is not necessarily. You don't have to fire them because of it. That's what I read. No employee. Get this. No employee shall be terminated solely due to the positive results. So you can't terminate them solely due to that.
But you can terminate them for
other reasons. Now, there's another piece to this bill. In essence, what it provides, in summary, as I recall, is all teachers, when you apply for a license, would be fingerprinted every time. With me? Anytime you apply for a license, your fingerprint. You have to submit fingerprints. Everybody. Each time. That could be true. That could be true.
So
this bill hasn't passed nor has a hearing been held on it, but I believe that's what that bill provides.
Do they know that the Wrap Back program just requires one set of fingerprints? Or maybe they're not using that. I don't know. Okay.
That was mentioned.
Craig was there yesterday, and I was in personal financial literacy. But anyway, yeah. Ken?
Yes, Madam Chair. I was there as well. I don't know if I heard that part of the testimony. I wasn't there for the whole thing. But I talked to Senator Smith, who introduced the bill, and asked him why he felt it was necessary to fingerprint at every renewal. And he said that he had worked carefully with KBI on crafting this, and that he had law enforcement experience, and that fingerprints can change over time with injuries or whatever. So that was the rationale for going at every renewal. But I'm not sure that's going to pass in that fashion. That's part of the discussion. But that was his rationale for it.
Yeah.
It seems to me that, I just was recently fingerprinted voluntarily for, and we took 10 fingerprints. So I could lose a finger or have one chewed up, and still I would think that would match. But I don't know how that plays out. So.
Did you tell them we were looking at a red?
No.
Oh, okay.
That was for my personal use. Oh.
Did you tell them that or did they know that?
No, I did not have an opportunity to speak. I was just there to listen. So the committee does not know yet that we are working on this regulation change. Right.
341 provides a 5-year phase-in of all-day kindergarten funding, and I think many people thought that the governor did this, introduced it, and early childhood is very popular and so forth. But anyway, there's a special committee being assigned in the House on all-day kindergarten, and I think it's up in the air.
Very much.
Up in the air. And when you sign a special committee for that purpose, why, it'll be interesting. They're meeting for the first time this Thursday. 343, interesting, provides that every governmental unit or entity, including school districts, must report all funds expended for lobbying. Cities, counties, school districts, community colleges, anybody, governmental entity, you have to report whatever it costs you're spending. And if you're a part of an association, that part, I think, you would report. 2432 requires local boards to adopt and implement a plan to address child sexual abuse for all K-12 pupils. The bill outlines what must be included in the plan. A lot of it has to do with training. I mean, I think it's already in the law now, but most of this bill, I think, is training the people so they'll know how to recognize and how to report. 2454, have you ever heard of the 10-mile rule and the 2.5-mile rule and all that? What this bill does right now, except for Johnson, Wyandotte, Sedgwick, and Shawnee, the 4 big counties, exclude them, don't apply to them. Anybody that lives over 2.5 miles from their home to school, anybody beyond that, another district can come in and pick them up and take them to their district. Now, what this bill does, this bill includes all the 4 big counties. And I think that it may have a challenge With me? It may have a challenge. So, anyway, so that, they changed the 2.5 to 10 and exclude the 4 big counties. 2475 it provides, hearing was on this, that all students during the 11th and 12th grade prior to graduation must take a class in personal financial literacy. And it was interesting, some of the testimony. One person testified, and I can understand kind of where she was coming from, but the only person that can teach this and has knowledge in this base is FACS teachers, Family Consumer Science. But if you talk to the business departments, they don't always agree, and neither does the economics department always agree. But this bill requires, and there's no endorsement for it, so the board could choose who they thought would be best qualified. But there is, you're required to have 11th and 12th grade prior to graduation.
I have a question. It also outlines specifically what must be taught.
Oh yes, yeah, it lines out. It don't just exclude other things, but it says there are certain things you must teach.
Janet.
I'm sorry.
Janet and then Sally.
Okay. Are they aware that Kansas Council on Economic Education does not support this? I mean, and they are the biggest, they're huge.
Yeah, several organizations were mentioned during the discussion, but there was not unanimity among the legislators. They raised numerous questions. For example, one lady who has real bright kids like all your kids are, and she talked about, said her daughter took every class possible that related to her goals in life. And it was high-level math, science, and said she would not want, said we've tried to teach her personal financial literacy, and said she got a job, she saves her money and all this, but she said her argument was you may cause a student not to take a class in advanced math or science that they want to take if you mandate it. So the discussion was pretty good and pretty thorough. This 2546, somebody else will need to explain this one a little more thoroughly. It requires state assessments for all accredited non-public schools, but the assessment will be the 2002-3. And we're trying to get to see what KU would charge us even to go back that far, because those are just multiple choice test 1 and 2 is notice I said accredited non-public. I don't think very many accredited non-public would want to go back and take a test that's 12 years old.
Janet, I have a question.
I'm sorry. Sally Cobble had a question, Dale.
Okay.
On that, are homeschools considered accredited by the
There is technically, Mark can correct me, there is no such thing legally as a home school. They're a private, non-accredited school.
So they're a private, non-accredited.
Private, non-accredited.
Accredited, non-public. Well, that would be accredited.
There would just be a separate state assessment for them.
Yeah, but all of the accredited parochial schools take the state assessment, and I've not heard any issues there of them even wanting to do this. So I'm not sure where it come from and the reason why not accredited. 2563 requires local boards to notify parents. This sounds simple. You have to notify parents. I think it is on regular basis. Maybe it's, you remember, Craig? Monthly? Monthly. Do it monthly, what their balance is in a food service account. Think about that in Wichita. That'd be quite a challenge to do that. And, you know, are you behind? Are you caught up? Or how much where you stand? At the end of each month, you have to notify the parent how much is in the kitty for their student. There's one more that I want to tell you about. It's going to be interesting. We're trying to decipher it now, and I've got very far on it, but just came in a few minutes ago. It's Senate Bill 369, and it requires us to come up with they intended, they didn't do that, but that's their intent, intended to take certain accounting codes out of the budget. We get up all these accounting codes out of the budget. We add up all the dollars, and we divide it by the number of students, for example, get an amount per pupil to determine their efficiency. With me? To determine. So they have an efficiency number. And you'll need to look at it because it gets into like food service. Food service and how it's worded and the delivery system and how you do that and so forth varies quite a bit across the state. Also, bulk purchasing. Well, if you don't bulk purchase, then there's no cost because you don't do bulk purchasing. And so we're going to have to figure that out. I talked to the sponsor of the bill. I said, we need to sit down and figure out what your intent and purpose is, because if we write the fiscal note the way it is now, it will be pretty high.
Dale, did you skip 25, 21 at the top of the back page on purpose? Or?
No, didn't intend to. Wouldn't been a bad idea, though. This provides that school districts shall request proof of lawful presence of all pupils enrolled for the first time. The report shall be submitted to the state board showing the total number of students by district who are enrolled but failed to prove their lawful presence. The Department of Ed shall annually publish this on their website, and we have to compute the amount of dollars these people that are not lawfully present and available on the website.
Do they really expect people to announce when they're not lawfully?
Evidently somebody does, but as a general rule, not very people. Do you know anybody that says I'm illegal and write it down? I mean, they just don't do that very often. And you talk to them, and some of the districts that might have something like that, there is not a lot of advertising.
But this says they have to request proof of lawful presence. What does that mean?
Birth certificate, I guess.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that was. But I tell you what, there'd be a lot. There's quite a few folks that may be lawfully present that don't have a lot of paperwork to prove it. With me? I bet you know some.
But what about the federal law that says we can't do that?
It doesn't say you can't do that. It says, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Well, because the bill also states that it doesn't preclude anyone from getting an education. No withholding of education for anybody who's on this list. The bill is supposedly to just determine how many students there are, no names attached to that, and then how much state money is being spent to educate those kids.
Law, but there's a federal law.
It just says that it says you can't deny an education for somebody who's illegal.
We'll go ahead and, Ken's right, we'll go ahead and educate them.
Yeah.
But we're not going to like it.
Just to determine how much is being spent for whatever reasons.
In some of the communities, when you ask for that, you're going to scare the living daylights out of them, though. If you're, I know. One time we had one community, Sally, out in your area, that Heard the INS was coming, and then Monday morning they lost 20 kids.
I was on the local school board.
Oh.
At that time, and it was horrible, because really, the kids were legal. We just didn't know about the parents. And even sometimes when the parents are legal, they are so fearful of law enforcement because of where they come, they go hide. I mean, it's
Yep.
not an understanding of the culture.
We do have questions, one from Kathy Bush.
Dale, I want clarification on 2454. The last sentence says the bill also includes Johnson, Wyandotte, Sedgwick, and Shawnee, which are excluded from the current law.
Correct.
So it will include those four counties.
It would include them, that's correct.
Oh, that's huge.
So if,
Clearwater could come up with
yeah, I think this bill has got challenges, but if, for example, if Wichita wanted to, they could go down to Clearwater, be one, Clearwater, Cheney, as long as they're 2.5 miles from school, and pick them up, or if this law changes to 10 miles or over 10 miles, they go down and pick them up. So,
It's more likely to have the other thing happen.
yep, that is true. This bill was a big deal for Clay Hart. That was his bill. They even changed the date so he can come in and testify. So, but anyway, I think it's up to him. We wouldn't have any miles limit. But.
Now, Janet Waugh has a question.
No, I pass.
Janet Waugh passes. Okay. Any other questions for Dale? Well, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and it's been thus far an interesting session. Is that fair, Diane? Interesting. That's about all we got to say so far.
Hang in there.
Okay, thank you.
Next on our agenda is approval of the consent agenda. Do I hear a motion to approve the consent agenda? Moved by Janet Waugh. Is there a second to the motion? Seconded by Carolyn Campbell. Is there discussion? All in favor, raise your right hand. So, okay, we have a 9-1 vote with Steve Roberts abstaining.
Yes.
Okay. And then we have an executive session. I'm going to hand the motion to Sally. If you'll, I have started at the bottom what the reason is.
If you want. Okay, I would,
Is your mic on?
no. I would like to entertain a motion to go into executive session for the purpose of discussing consultation with boards, bargaining representation, and employee-employee negotiations to protect the public interest in negotiating a fair and equitable contract. And in the executive session, I would like for the attorney and Diane DeBacker to meet with us. And we would like to go in for 15 minutes. And when we return, there will be no action.
Is there a second to the motion? Seconded by Steve McNeese. All in favor, raise your right hand.
He's Jim.
It's Jim McNeese.
Jim McNeese.
Joe down there.
It's all good.
It's evening, Jim.
Good looking.
He's one of the J's.
Okay. All in favor, raise your right hand. 10-0. Thank you. Well, I was hoping we could start right now.
We can't.
Oh.
They're going to shut everything down.
5:20.
Minutes.
Okay, we will begin at 5:20.